Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. My name is Brian Driscoll. I'm the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. And as you can see today, I am in the Virginia home base here at Irish Breakdown. So we'll be there today. Hopefully the sound and the audio and the video is obviously going to come out right. We away from home here this next week, but going to have a lot for you today. Obviously, there's a lot going on, and RF Nat Boy getting us started with a super sticker, $10 super sticker. I appreciate that much. But it's mailbag time, everybody, and I'm going to be solo here for a little bit. Vince and Ryan are supposed to be joining us here very soon. They both have a couple things that they're working on, but we're going to go ahead and get started here right away and just kind of dive into some questions. Obviously, today we'll talk about anything that you want to talk about. Obviously, I'm in Virginia. My mom was supposed to get out of the hospital today. She is not going to be cleared to come home today. So probably one more day in the hospital as her recovery continues to go along. But appreciate all the well wishes and the prayers and all those type of things from everybody about that. But I'm ready to get rocking and rolling if you all are ready to get rocking and rolling. So I think that it's a lot of good questions today. Obviously, the NFL scouting combine started yesterday. I know we have some questions about that. We'll dive into that here when Ryan Roberts shows up. I want to hold off on some of those things because I definitely have some strong opinions about that. But I want to talk to Ryan about kind of what he saw yesterday at the combine. And then expectations for Kyron Williams and some things he's hearing about him and some things he's hearing about Kyle Hamilton. So. And of course, we'll kind of mix recruiting in throughout instead of kind of putting it on the back burner like we had been. So we'll just kind of start hammering those things out right away. So let's dive into it, everybody, with our questions today. And we're going to get started with Chris Basker. Chris, thanks for starting us off here. And he says, is it true that Michigan experts think that they're the favorite for Dante Moore? Also that he is wanting to commit in March or April. Hashtag Indy wants Dante, go Irish. Chris, I honestly don't pay a lot of attention to Michigan experts because I just kind of feel like Michigan and experts don't always belong in the same sentence. There's some good people there, but there's also some hacks that cover that program, if we're just going to be honest about it. And do they think it or do they report it? And that's kind of the thing with one particular Michigan person and that I have in mind that covers the team that used to cover Notre Dame is I don't think he thinks half the crap that he says publicly. I think he says what he says publicly to gain clicks. I mean, he's an attention hound, and for lack of about saying that about as nice as a way if I can say it. So I don't think he believes half the stuff he says. Otherwise, he's just really wrong a lot. Regarding Dante Moore, look, I'm not going to change my stance from what it's been for months. And for months, I've been trying to tell y'all, and you've listened to me, that Notre Dame is in much better position with Dante Moore than people realize. If you're on the Irish Breakdown message board, you know I've had multiple kind of updates on the quarterback recruiting, right, and why Chris Vizina's commitment was, not commitment, excuse me, that was not a slip of the tongue, that was just a misspeak. His visit was pushed back, which was supposed to be this weekend. The reason that was pushed back, and we've reported on a lot of that. So if you're on the message board, you kind of know some of this stuff. But look, I have always been confident in Dante Moore in Notre Dame's position. My confidence now is higher than it's ever been. And everybody kind of panics about Michigan and Michigan State, Miami. There's a time people were panicking about Miami and now LSU and. All I can tell you is what I know and what I hear and what I've read and just knowing Dante and knowing people that know Dante and all these different type of things. Look, I believe that Notre Dame is in a great position there. I do. I believe they're in a great position there. It's about closing, right? And that's going to be the key. So do I think they're the favorite? I've never felt Michigan was the favorite for Dante Moore, at least not since I met him back in April of 2021 at a camp. Never felt Michigan was the favorite. Never felt that they were the team to beat. I've said so publicly time and time again. Michigan fans continue to say that over and over and over again, and they're going to, in my opinion, I believe that they're going to be wrong. So again, that doesn't mean that he has committed to Notre Dame or those things. I'm not implying that. I'm simply saying I just think when it comes to decision-making time for Dante that it's not going to be Michigan. And regarding his time frame, I've always felt that he was going to be a spring guy. This is also something we discussed on the message board. I felt that the latest he would do it would be May, June. I have always felt that it would be probably an April decision. I still feel that way, as far as him kind of making a public decision. And, I've kind of given evidence for why that is, and the evidence is if you just go back and look at, the combine, or not the combine. Sorry, I'm making a correction for an article that Ryan Roberts wrote about the combine. But if you go look at top 10 quarterbacks the last 3-4 years, the vast majority, something like I think 22 of the 30 top 10 quarterbacks in the last 3 classes are guys that committed by the end of April, and I think it's like 27 of the 30 committed by the end of the summer. And so, just history tells me, my knowledge of the situation tells me, all those things tell me that this is not going to be a long-term drawn out thing. Because the other thing Dante has said, and we've talked about this, Dante has said in the past, he understands that he has to find the balance between making the right decision for himself, which he should always have as priority number one, but then also understanding that, like, wherever I go, I want to be surrounded by great players, and the earlier I make my decision, the more impact I can have on who's in the class with me. So I've always kind of felt like that would be a timeline for him to make a public announcement. And so I think those are the things that I think we'll see. So I would be optimistic about an April decision or announcement for Dante Moore in regards to letting people know whatever it is he's going to decide. So that's kind of where I'm at with that one. But, that's kind of the latest on Dante's situation. He was at Michigan last night watching them play Iowa. They're watching the basketball team play Iowa. They got pounded by Iowa last night. That's been an incredibly, incredibly disappointing season for Michigan's basketball team. So Dante got to watch that last night. And he'll be at LSU this weekend as part of it's not like just him. It's also part of like an entire, it's like a group of people is my understanding. So I think he'll continue to make the rounds and just get out and see some places here this last time. And then once he's done doing that, I think then you will see him look into making sort of the decision timeline. So I think that's kind of where we're at. Vince, we're talking about Dante Moore. The first question was about Dante Moore. That's kind of really, we've only got to the first question.
I know I'm shocked by that, by the way, that would be the first question.
And we were talking about the Michigan experts.
Those don't go together, do they?
The leader, that's kind of what I said.
Okay.
Especially one particular Michigan expert that you and I both know well. So
yeah.
But we discussed that. So I just want to get into a couple Dante Moore questions, Vince. I got a couple started. If you can kind of go look at some of the ones at the bottom.
Okay.
I just want to kind of get all this Dante Moore stuff out now.
Yeah.
So that way we can kind of focus on all the other topics that are going to be discussed. And as regarding the Chris Vezina thing, it's kind of funny how this stuff goes, right? Like people report things and, this is going to be the case and they're leading for this guy and that guy and the other thing. And as we said in the show, like at no point in time have I ever felt Notre Dame was the leader for Chris Vezina, because at no point in time did I ever feel like Notre Dame was pushing to be the leader for Chris Vezina.
Right. Because
as we felt all along, Dante was the guy that we thought Notre Dame wanted and the guy that we thought that they wanted to focus on and those type of things. So that hasn't changed. Right. I think Notre Dame likes Chris Vezina a lot. They like Jackson Arnold. They like Nico. They like Jaden Rashad. I mean, there's a lot of guys they like. But it's been very clear from day one, as we have said here from day one, that Dante Moore is their top guy. So, I never bought the hype about Michigan and then Miami and then, with Dante Moore and then, Chris Vezina being pushed. And we have been very consistent, right? Because somebody on the message board was like, the quarterback recruiting drama. And I'm like, there is no drama.
It's very
right?
clear.
Like,
Yeah.
It's like maybe I don't know what's happening what other people are reporting. I can't speak to what other people are reporting.
Right.
And look, everybody has sources and contacts and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not disparaging anybody, but like if you've been on the show, the message for 8 months has been the same. That's the guy they want. Dante's the guy they want.
Right.
He likes Notre Dame a lot. I have never at any point in time felt that I would rather be someone other than Notre Dame and Dante Moore's group. We've been very consistent about that. So
right.
through all the Jackson Arnold talk and all the Chris Vizina talk, we've been very steady about, look, you can get into the ups and downs of covering recruiting, or you can come to Irish Breakdown where we're just going to shoot you straight.
Right? This is what it is. That's right. Yeah.
Look, it'd be advantageous for me to have gone with the ups and downs, because nothing gets people interested in clicking on stories than here's the latest on this quarterback or that quarterback. Look, we're just going to tell you what the truth is. And the truth is that Dante Moore has been the guy for Notre Dame this entire process.
Right.
And that doesn't mean they don't like other guys. That doesn't mean that if they lost out on Dante and got other guys, that they wouldn't be thrilled to get those other guys. They would have been happy.
And it sounds like they've done a good job with those guys as well.
Right. They Coach Reese, I think, kind of learned from not learned from his mistakes, but has evolved the process as he's gotten a better grasp of how recruiting big time quarterbacks goes.
Sure.
Right. And he played this one perfectly, in my opinion. Now the key is closing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? That's going to be the final key for him, is closing. So up to this point, I couldn't have done a better job. This completely knocked it out of the park. Now the key is you got to go out and you got to close the deal. Right. And that's going to be the final part. And then at that point in time, you can then focus on 2024 quarterbacks. So that's kind of where we are there. Got another one from God, Country, Notre Dame, and Barbecue. I love this name, by the way. I say it every time. Every time he says this, I just love it. It says, if we get Dante Moore, how much would the offense change from a Buckner-led offense to a Moore-led offense? So the nice thing about kind of how they've recruited quarterback is, for a long time, there was a lot of inconsistency how they recruited quarterback. I mean, it's like you get Everett Golson 1 year, and then it's like you're recruiting an Avery Davis. Brandon Wimbush is 1 year, and he's a completely different player than Ian Book and Tommy Reese. And it's just like there was just no kind of method to the madness of what they were recruiting. And I think even though the quarterbacks they have on their roster now come from different styles, I do think that they all can run the same offense. And I think for me, when I look at it, is now, depending on whether it's Drew Pine, whether it's Tyler Buckner, whether it would be a Dante Moore, if Notre Dame was able to land Dante Moore, because that's the hypothetical of the question, what would the offense look like? And the thing is, they don't have to change the offense at all for any of them. There's just going to be some emphasis changes. And the only emphasis change from Tyler to either Drew or Dante is just more of the designed runs, is really what it comes down to. It's like with Tyler, you're going to see the running part of his ability. Like, and I'm not talking about just like scrambles, right? But like the actual, read zones, quarterback runs, things like that are going to be more a part of the offense. Where with a Dante, he is a runner. You can have some selected runs for him because he's very athletic, but he's not a runner. You know what I mean? So like you may call some short yardage read zones where he can pull it and get outside and keep you honest. And he could be a very good runner if he wanted to be. That's just not really his game. His game is, I'm going to use my legs to make things happen in the pass game. And then if I got to use them to go move the chains and make you miss and do all that, he can do all that. But he is a passing first quarterback, where Tyler's more of a balanced quarterback, run and pass. So it's an emphasis change. So, it's back to the question. It's the offense doesn't change at all from those quarterbacks. It's just the emphasis on certain schemes over the other will change. And that's true if you have 4 quarterbacks in a row that have identical skill sets. You're still going to have an emphasis in play calling, because some quarterbacks, no matter the skill set, mentally, comfort level, are going to like certain schemes more than others. And it could be based on what they think their strengths are. It could be based on the receiving core. Like, hey, we did a great job running these 4 vert concepts 2 years ago when we had 2 6'4" receivers and a 6'5" tight end, because we could just go back shoulders and stuff like that. But, we have a different group of receivers now. We have a bunch of 6', 6'1" guys that are really fast. And so with them, I like this concept more. right? So even with the same quarterback from year to year, you could see a change in sort of the emphasis of the offense based on the personnel. And then when you change from quarterback to quarterback, some quarterbacks are just going to be more comfortable throwing things that other quarterbacks are going to be throwing things or reading things, no matter if they have identical skill sets or not. So that's really, Notre Dame has gotten to the point now, which I like about the way that Tommy Rees is recruited. When you look at Drew Pine, even Brendan Clark, Tyler Buckner, Steve Angeli, his focus on trying to get Dante Moore in 2023, they all have sort of unique skills, but they all run the same offense. I love that. So John Klimek talking about Dante Moore says, not a runner. He's been running through my dream commitments quite a bit. So
love it.
Let's bring in Ryan Roberts. We're now 15 minutes in, and we've only talked about Dante Moore at this point in time. So we're just kind of going through and getting all the Dante Moore questions out of the way now. I love this comment. This isn't really a question. This is a comment. Would it be fair to say? Well, actually, he has another comment. I'm going to get to his question first. He said, also, my girlfriend and I just had our first child. Congratulations, by the way. Congratulations to you, your lady, and Marlo, your new baby girl. We delivered it. This is the best part. I'm sorry. This is the second best part. The best part is you had a baby.
I was going to say. Yeah, right.
Second best part is we delivered at Mott's Children's Hospital in Ann Arbor. So I've been sure to wear all my IB Irish gear every visit. So yes,
well done.
Well done. Absolutely. And then Jacob had a question too. He said, would it be fair to say we've got the slight edge on Dante? Would he be the biggest needle mover in recent history as a recruit? Ryan, I think you and I were talking about this the other night, right? And look, do they have a slight edge on Dante? I don't really kind of want to get into the quantifying. Is it a big edge, slight edge, medium? Look, we have been very consistent that Notre Dame is in a great place with Dante Moore and has been for a long time. I would not trade places. If I'm Notre Dame, I'm not trading places with anybody. Okay. Absolutely. So take that for what you want to take that for. But that's what, we've been saying that for a while. So it's kind of funny. People are like, hey, do you think Notre Dame leaves for Dante? I'm like, are you new to the channel? Or, I'm just curious. Because, would he be the biggest needle mover in recent history? So Ryan and I were discussing this, right? Mm-hmm. And we had said he won't be the highest ranked recruit that Notre Dame ever got. I would argue he's not even the most just gifted recruit that Notre Dame has got. I would say that's Jalen Smith, and I don't think there's a close second, just as far as just ability. The difference, however, is when you talk about needle mover, Jalen's a great player, but Jalen was also part of two of the worst defenses of the last 20 years at Notre Dame, because the defensive player, no matter how great he is, can't do it by himself, right? And he's a linebacker, so that also doesn't necessarily move the needle in regards to being that Pied Piper of other recruits, although Jalen was a part of a top 5 class. But I don't think it was because of Jalen per se. The difference here would be Dante's a quarterback. Right. And it's kind of like the NFL draft where, you may think Kyle Hamilton's the best player in the draft, but you're not going to take him number 1 because of the whole he's a safety and impact on the game and all this other kind of stuff, right? And so that was the argument, Ryan. So my I think that's where we talk about it. We talk about needle mover. It's not saying he's the best recruit that they've ever gotten. It's the combination of talent plus recruiting profile plus position is really where this comes from.
No, I agree completely. And we obviously did have a deeper conversation about it. And it would be, in my opinion, in some time. And even the Jalen Smith thing, Jalen Smith was a in-state player, right? Like he was an Indiana guy. Not only the simple fact of 5-star quarterback, right? The highest ranked quarterback to my knowledge Notre Dame's gotten since Jimmy Clausen, right? To start out with.
Yeah.
But you're also going into the state of Michigan, right? Like you're stealing them right out of Michigan's backyard. Michigan just played in the playoff last year, right? So it's not like they are, I know obviously they've had the back and forth with when's Coach Harbaugh leaving and all that type of stuff. But Michigan just came off of a really good year and you're going to the state of Michigan and you're stealing someone like Dante Moore, who is a national recruit. It's not like it was a foregone conclusion at any point that he's going to go stay in the state of Michigan because Ohio State's going to be after him. The University of Miami's been after him. And recently there's the national perspective on the recruitment for a guy like a Dante Moore. So, Vince, I know you're the biggest Michigan fan here, but
clearly,
going into Michigan's backyard and still a 5-star quarterback, man, that is sweet, especially from a Notre Dame fan perspective,
It just makes it even better that and again, these two words don't necessarily go together, but the Michigan experts think that Michigan is in the lead. So
right,
even better when Notre Dame goes in there and takes them, if that is in fact what happens, right? I mean,
for sure.
There's no better victory than over your rival. Period. End of discussion, right? Whether that's on the field, whether it's in recruiting, whether it's in a drinking game. It doesn't matter what that victory is, but that victory is still so sweet. So that will make it even better for me. No question about that.
Absolutely. Because not only, because the state of Michigan just in general right now, I just talked about Michigan making the playoff. Michigan State had a nice, comeback season last year too, after struggling for a couple years. And they seem to be trending in a good direction with Mel Tucker. And they've been in a pretty good position for Dante as well. And then obviously Miami with Coach Gaddis going down there from Michigan. That was kind of a talking point for like a week or so. That was like, oh, is Miami going into the conversation?
Right.
I don't think there was ever really much. I don't think there was ever steam in that conversation. So, but I think that Notre Dame's in a really solid position. They have to obviously finish here moving forward. But again, if they are able to go in there and steal a 5-star quarterback out of the state of Michigan, as a Notre Dame fan, how could you not just be so thrilled about that? Because not only do you have a 5-star kid, but beating Michigan for a player of that caliber is just, it's awesome, man.
It's icing on the cake, man. Like, it makes it even better. And Big Jim, Vince's hatred of Michigan is true and pure, like grain alcohol. I don't know about the last part, but the first part is absolutely true. So that there's no doubt about that, which is why I'm willing to wear a Michigan shirt if they get Dante Moore. That's the whole thing. So I am willing to do it.
I've given you some pretty good ideas for that, though, Vince.
You really have. You really have. And I'm really looking forward to it.
I said, look, he has to have a Michigan shirt on. It doesn't mean that you can't have a block M down here with a picture of an Irishman, taking a leak on it, right? It just has to have a Michigan thing on it, right?
That's right. There was no caveats.
I'll be honest with you. The whole beating Michigan for Dante Moore thing has just never been a thing for me. I get it, but it's just kind of like I just don't view Michigan as on Notre Dame's level and have been for a while. And I also never felt like Michigan was the team to beat. Like, beating Michigan mattered to me when they beat Josh Burnham, because Josh Burnham grew up a Michigan fan. Right, they were the perceived leader for him for a long time. I guess for me, because I felt that Notre Dame was the leader for so long, that it just never really got into the whole, oh, they beat Michigan for him. And I'm like, yeah, they should have beat Michigan for him. Like,
I think, Brian, I think my point is more like going into Michigan.
Oh, I get where you're coming from.
Premise.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I was not disputing what you're saying. No, I get it. And I would imagine most people are kind of on the same line as you are. Like, you go into Michigan and you beat the hated rival for the kid from Detroit.
It's icing on the cake.
They have cleaned up in Michigan.
Absolutely.
There was like a 2-year stretch where Penn State came in and got a few kids that were like solid players, that Michigan wanted. But like, Michigan is really, for the most part, cleaned up in Detroit, especially the public school league, for a while now. So, I get all that, and I wasn't disputing that at all. I just was kind of like, my thing is, it's just for me, it's been a little bit different. Because normally I would feel the same way you do, Ryan. It's just like this one, for some reason, I don't have that same view. Now, that may change once, if he were to make the decision and pick Notre Dame, if that were to happen. I think maybe then I might get a little bit, kind of snarky and salty with Michigan, but for me, it just hasn't really registered with me yet.
Brandon's got the super chat. Thank you very much. Brandon says, if you were recruiting Dante to Notre Dame, what would be your pitch? Put yourself in the shoes of Reese and or Free. It's not or, it's and right now. So I want to make sure I put that out there. And let's hear your best pitch to this elite quarterback.
Let's go ahead and go first, Ryan. Kick us off.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna steal something from you that you've said in the past, Brian. Right? It's the fact of like, let's be different, right? Let's not go and be the next guy at a situation. Let's be someone to take it back and to be the Pied Piper, like you're saying, right? Like the gatekeeper, the next guy that's going to be able to ascend this program into new heights or old heights, I guess, depending on how you look at it. And I think that there is a trajectory that can go there. Because I think obviously right now with the momentum that Coach Freeman and staff has put into the 2023 class and just finishing off the 2022 class in general, everything is trending in the right direction, right? So let's be a part of this wave. Don't get caught in the wake. Let's be a part of this thing. And let's be something that's different, not be something that's the next. Let's be the new. And I think that would be just my biggest point to him being a program changer. Like literally, I talk about the other programs that we've used as examples and say, like, these guys were the first. They started trend. You want to be a trendsetter? You just want to be the next guy in line.
Right. Yeah, and I think that works as far as the national programs for sure. And I think for a kid like Dante, it's like, listen, man, being a quarterback at Notre Dame is different than anything else that's out there. I mean, it just is. There was a Will Blackman, right, former NFL player. I believe he played at Boston. Where did he play at Boston? Was he a BC guy? Right.
There was definitely a Blackman at Boston College, for sure.
And he tweeted something out last week.
Cornerback?
Yeah. He tweeted something out that didn't go over well with some BC people, but went over well with Notre Dame fans, which was, he basically compared, like, I'm gonna have to find the tweet because it was really fascinating. But he basically said, like, if you could kind of go anywhere to play quarterback, it's kind of hard to not go with Notre Dame, right? And I'm gonna find that tweet because it was really a fascinating thing. Like, even someone who went to a rival of Notre Dame's, who understands, I'm supposed to hate Notre Dame. Even he was kind of like, Notre Dame's different. Being a quarterback at Notre Dame is different. And, I just think that's kind of my pitch, right? And like you talked about it, it is different. Being at Notre Dame is different. Do you want to be part of something, that's going to, be new and be part of that emerging program, or do you want to be part of just kind of maintaining with the other places? And then when you look at it from a Michigan standpoint, it's like, hey man, it's like blaze your own trail, right? Like that's the counter when you look at the in-state schools is, blaze your own trail. Come here, be different, do something different, do something that hasn't been done a whole lot. And I think that would be another pitch for me. And then the other part of it too is, man, hey, look, we're building something special here, and you're kind of that missing piece to this whole thing, right? Like, we've got all the pieces in place to win. We're missing that great trigger man. And I think that if you can sell that effectively, I think that works. And of course, there's the scheme fits and the, hey, you fit in this way, and you're what we're trying to accomplish here schematically and all this other kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot of different things you can do. And then of course, the final piece is I think Dante is a very smart, very intellectually minded kid that thinks big picture, that thinks long term about his future, which is how he should view things. And I think the fact of, coming to Notre Dame and how that sets you up for the rest of your life is one of those things that can have a really, big impact on, what you're trying to accomplish. So I think that aspect of it is, I think is also part of the selling point to Dante.
Well, and I think it would be, look, we can talk all day about what you can do for Notre Dame, but let's talk about what Notre Dame can do for you. You know what I mean? Vince,
I found it. I got to interrupt real quick. This is what Will Blackman said, played in the NFL with the Boston College. Payne, the question was from FanDuel, said, if you could be the starting quarterback for any college football team, where are you going? His response was, pains me to say this, but being the starting quarterback of Notre Dame is like getting a law degree from Harvard. And it was like, yeah, okay, it makes sense. Right? I mean, if Ian Book can be a fourth-round pick, what can you be, Dante Moore?
Exactly. I mean? Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of my thing. So,
I think that's a legit argument to make. I really do.
And the combine doesn't help. I mean, we'll get into that too. It doesn't hurt. I mean, where say, look at all these low 4.4 guys we're pumping through every year. You know what I mean? And hey, Kevin Austin wasn't even our fastest receiver. He may not even been our second fastest receiver last year, right? Like, that's the selling point you give to him, And so, hey man, come here because you're that missing link to make this whole thing work.
Right.
Good question, Brandon.
Very good question. We've got some other super chats that we can. You want to go right in a row with the super chats? You want to go back and forth?
I want to try to get all the Dante stuff out.
Oh, gotcha.
That was the kind of the thing I wanted to get to, or at least as much of it as we can. So once we're done with the Dante stuff, we're just going to kind of get right back to the top.
Okay.
We're not going to be done with the Dante stuff for a couple months, Brian. We're not going to be done.
I was going to say, I mean, I was because we kind of talked about Dante and things. So there was a question in there, and I didn't star it, but I will just say it verbally. It was, if Dante comes, what receivers will come with him, kind of a question. What dominoes are going to fall if he commits to Notre Dame?
I feel like we've talked about it a ton, right? If Dante Moore does end up at Notre Dame, I feel like the chances for Cornell Tate obviously improve a ton, right? He's originally an Illinois kid that's playing down at IMG Academy. He's got a relationship with Dante. I think that Notre Dame obviously has been recruiting him very hard, even outside of the whole Dante Moore layer of the conversation. But I think that if they are able to land Dante Moore, that dramatically improves the chances of getting a Cornell Tate there. And then I think that other guys, I don't know if it's directly because of Dante Moore. I mean, obviously that will have a big impact to kind of solidifying why you do want to come to Notre Dame. But I think that Notre Dame is in a great position with Braylon James down at Del Valle High School in Texas. I think that they're continuing to move the needle with Jaden Greathouse down at Westlake. I don't think that he is I would not. Notre Dame is definitely not the leader in the clubhouse for that one, but they are making a big push for him, and he is getting him on campus a couple times over the next few months, over the spring and summer, which is going to be huge because he has not been on campus yet. So that is obviously a big point of emphasis into this recruitment. And I think that Rodney Gallagher is a guy that they have been in on. And they have made a really strong push since the new year, especially since Coach Stuckey has come aboard as the new wide receiver coach. And he's a dynamic player out there in PA who has kind of taken a step back from recruiting during basketball season, because we've mentioned it a few times. He's actually playing in the state championship game tonight. So after tonight, he'll kind of be ramping up. Vince, they're like 25-0 or something, man. Like, they are a really good team. He's like he has several offers, Brian. What was it, like Illinois offered him just for basketball, and there were a couple others that were offered him just for basketball.
He was getting basketball offers, but it wasn't like, he's getting offers from Ryder and, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
like Fairfield. It was like
it was
Big
Ten schools. And
exactly. And like good basketball schools, right? Yeah, he was. Yeah, exactly. It wasn't like Siena and Iona, and not that those aren't, nice. I mean, if you're getting a full ride to go play for them, God bless you.
Absolutely.
This kid's a legitimate Division I basketball player as a point guard, and which I absolutely love.
And legitimate in that sense too, with the fact that he's only 5'10" or about that size, right? So like, you have to be a stud to be a.
He's listed from anywhere from like 5'11" to 6 foot is what he's listed as, but who knows?
That means he's 5'10". I mean, that's
right.
I've been around enough high school rosters to know that's all lies.
Oh yeah. But Notre Dame is obviously, they are pushing hard for that one. Another kid that will know a lot more over the next, couple months here. As soon as, again, basketball season's going to end tonight, whether he wins. And I think, they're definitely the favorite, being 24-0 or whatever they are, 25-0. So hopefully, good luck, first and foremost, to Rodney and Laurel Highlands in their state championship game. But I think that we'll have a good idea, because I know they've been pushing, obviously, to get him to come to campus sometime during the spring and summer. If they do, I feel that it's going to be trending in the right direction. For now, I mean, I don't think anybody can actually predict who a favorite would be in that recruitment, because I just don't think he's been super active up to this point, because, again, he just kind of took a step back during basketball season. But he's definitely at the top of the list, and having an elite quarterback, I think, improves that push, obviously. But that one's kind of more of a wait and see. Let's see how everything develops after basketball season.
Well, I think the big thing for me is just, I think it helps them close on the big time guys they're after now, right? Like, it helps them close, like you said, Braylon James, Rodney Gallagher, hopefully Cornell Tate. Although I think that I'm less and less confident in Cornell Tate picking Notre Dame, no matter what else happens, just because of the way he's playing the game. But then also, I got to remind myself, this kid's a master of social media. Like, he really is. For a young kid, he knows exactly how to manipulate people's emotions on Twitter. He's really, and I'm saying that as a compliment to the kid, right? Like, it's like, which school is he hyping up this week, right? And it's just, he's really good at that. But I think that may change if Dante picks Notre Dame. And again, I mean, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, right? But that's kind of, that's the discussion. I wanted to bring up one more Dante Moore. Go ahead, Vince, pull that one up, because that was.
Yeah. So Raymond Roberts says, I've watched some video of Dante Moore. If he signs with us, is there any chance we can get some of the receivers he plays with? And I wanted to ask. Somebody
had a response. Somebody had a response quickly after that, was like, I think that's more about Dante making those receivers look really good.
That would have been my guess.
He's got some good players. I mean, he's got an offensive lineman for his high school that's a Division I recruit. I don't think those kids are Notre Dame guys. I think they're really good high school players, which is why King was so good. It wasn't like he's surrounded by a bunch of bums.
Right.
And he makes him look great. I mean, he's got good high school players around him, and he's part of a great team, and Dante's the leader and the heart and soul of that team, but he's not throwing to stiffs, right? He's throwing to guys that if I was at a 1AA school or D2 school or, maybe even a Central Michigan. There's some guys on there that I'd love to recruit. They're just not Notre Dame guys, right? I think Dante helps with that. And then there was one other question I want to kind of get to, and then we're going to get on to some other topics. And if there's some good Dante questions come up, we'll get to them. But I really want to get to some other substantive team stuff. So Vince, why don't you go ahead and read this one here real quick?
Tom Chris 2488. If Notre Dame gets more, do y'all think that we should go ahead and take Sayin for the 24 class if he wants in, or hold off for a higher ranked guy? Seems like, am I saying his name right? Sayin?
I think so. Yeah.
I think it's Sayin.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sayin is almost a lock if we want him.
So my take on this is yes, whether or not you get Dante Moore should determine who you take in next year's class. I'm actually personally not a big fan of taking back-to-back 5 stars, because I feel like the odds of you keeping
both of
those guys all on the roster long term is pretty slim.
Yeah.
So I believe it's much easier to kind of go 2 years apart, where that guy comes in like, hey, look, you come in, he's a junior, you're a freshman. If he's as good as we think, he may be leaving soon. That's more of an easier sell than you're a year behind, and if you don't beat him out, he's going to have a head start on you. And some teams have done it; it just doesn't happen often. When Clemson went, Deshaun Watson was in the 2014 class, and Trevor Lawrence was in the 2018 class, and then they went 2 years apart with DJ, and then so that's kind of how I look at it. So, which leads me to say is, if you're going to take a kid in the year after, he needs to be a kid that you feel is going to be a program guy. What's interesting about this is, if they get Dante, it's going to make it almost impossible, in my opinion, to have any chance with CJ Carr. And getting CJ Carr is going to be hard anyway, right? It's Lloyd Carr's grandson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if Michigan were to have gotten Dante, then I think it would kind of open up a window a little bit to maybe get him. And I know Notre Dame loves CJ Carr. They like the Raiola kid. There's the 2024 quarterback class so far is good. It's not as good as the 2023 class so far. But the thing about saying that makes him unique is, I don't view him as an elite quarterback. I don't. I think he's a good player. I mean, he's like a Drew Pine, maybe a little bit more mobile, like that kind of guy. But he's got a high ranking. And now I don't know if it stays that high, right? But he's ranked 14th overall by 247. So you're getting a couple things. You're getting a kid that clearly loves Notre Dame, right? Because he loves Notre Dame. You're getting a kid that's a good football player, but you're also getting a kid that his love for Notre Dame maybe balances out the fact that he's going to be a year behind, a top quarterback. Because again, the premise of the question is if Notre Dame gets Dante Moore. Mm-hmm. So I'm speaking as if that has happened. I think he's a kid that you may have a better chance at keeping longer than you would a bigger name guy, and that's just kind of, so yeah, I would, if he wanted to come after you got Dante Moore, if that were to happen that way, yeah, I would. Or if you think you're going to get Dante and he wants to commit beforehand, then yeah, I would look into that. But if you aren't sure about getting Dante Moore, then no, I would not take Julian Sayin just yet. Maybe down the road, but not just yet. He's a good player, but again, Notre Dame needs to get a dude, and if they don't get one in 2023, then they definitely need to get one in 2024. So there's no rush to take a 2024 kid right now. But if you get your 2023 guy, then you can kind of expedite the process a little bit to say, hey, look, we know we're not getting CJ Carr right now. We know we're not getting Raiola right now. We know we're not getting the Davis kid from North Carolina. He's the number 1 player in the country. He's not going to come play after Dante Moore. Right. Let's go get Julian, who we like, who's a good player, and that kind of stuff. That's kind of how I think that they'll handle it. But that's a very good question. Very good question. I like that one. So, Vince, you want to kind of go back to the top and start this thing over again, man?
Absolutely. Tavis McKay says, why did teams go away from blitzing despite great success in the first half? I feel like Notre Dame has done this a lot in the past. Most vivid memory was 2011 Bowl versus Florida State up 14 at halftime.
Yeah, I hated that. I mean, because they were eating. If you guys remember correctly, Florida State had like 3 or 4 freshmen or redshirt freshmen starting. Like Bobby Hart was like a true freshman on that team. Like they were young. In the first half, Aaron Lynch and Lewis Nix and that D-line was eating Florida State alive. I mean, they were attacking and just eating them up. And then the second half, it's like they backed off. It was just the typical, you've got to lead that we've seen Kelly do, right? And, we've got to lead. They're not moving the ball on us. And then course, you had I think it was Andrew Hendricks threw a really bad pick in that game in the second half that led Florida State to kind of take that lead back, but it made no sense. But there's a practical reason to do it too, which is you come out in the second half, or you may see late in the second quarter or early in the third quarter, they have made an adjustment, right? So you know, hey, look, they're adjusting to this. They're not blitzing. Let's do something to kind of counter that. Or you may say, hey, look, they spent the whole half, you know, trying to figure out how to stop our blitz. Let's come out in first half because what's one way to beat the blitz? Let's throw. Let's throw quick. Let's get it out quick. Well, you know, first 2 plays of the next drive, we're dropping 8. You know, it can happen sometimes. And if I'm thinking that I'm getting a fire off the edge and you drop 8, I'm throwing it right into somebody who's dropping into coverage's chest, right? So that's part of the chess match too. But in general, you know, I'm a believer on defense that if the offense can't stop you, there's no reason to stop doing what you're doing. And, you know, make them at least stop you for one series before you kind of adjust and alter, you know? And
I think coaches run into at least what I have witnessed and what I think I see in the college level as well. Coaches try to just be too smart at times. You know what I mean? Like, if it ain't broke, man, keep going after it. I'm not saying run the same play 13 times in a row just because it's working.
Yeah.
But at the same
adjustment needs to be different blitzes, not stop blitzing.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, keep going after it.
How are they going to – and this is part of it. Like, great play callers are great anticipators.
Yes, absolutely.
And, you know, we're killing with this. Well, when and you've also got to be a great student. You know, you got to be a great student in the game, and the student is studying your opponent. In the past, when we broke down their film, when teams started really hurting them with, you know, weak side blitzes, this was their go-to adjustment. So we got to have blitzes in our back pocket that we're going to then go to when we think they've kind of started, then they're going to do this. That's what makes a great play caller, right? And that's what separates a good play caller who's a great game planner and a guy who is a great game planner and a great play caller. And, you know, and look, Bob Diaco was a really good coach in a lot of areas. He was not a great in-game adjustment guy, in my opinion. He just wasn't. And he was good. He was a good coach. He just wasn't. He wasn't that next level, hey, we got to come up with something real creative here. He was just I got better dudes than you got, and I'm going to make sure that my guys are in position to be successful, which is why he got embarrassed so badly by Alabama, because in that game, his dudes weren't necessarily better than the other dudes. He had a couple, but not enough. And I think that kind of cost him to but yeah, that Florida State game was one of the most frustrating, maddening games I've ever seen in person. Like, it was just like, they didn't even make Florida State do something to stop it. They anticipated they were going to do something and just stopped doing it. It was such a bizarre game plan. Go ahead, Vince. You got that one?
Oh, yeah. Here we go. Michael Ryan. I was looking over for the next question. Michael Ryan, thanks for the super chat, my man. Really appreciate it. Do you guys feel the NIL money elsewhere is going to cause recruiting issues at Notre Dame? Not for the guys that Notre Dame is going after.
It's going to cause issues, but the thing about it is recruiting money has always caused issues with some kids at Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's lost kids to money before, and they're going to lose now. I guess what I got to try to remind people of, Notre Dame has the number 1 class in the country, and every single commit happened after NIL became a thing, right? And so does that mean that some kids won't be swayed? No, some will, right? And they may lose some commits from time to time for it, but they would lose commits for me. This thing I've always felt, and Ryan, I don't know how you feel about this, but I always feel like if a kid's going to flip, he's going to find a reason to flip, and he's going to have some justification for it. If he's more attracted to some other program for whatever else, I mean, and he's not going to end up at Notre Dame, whether it's NIL, whether it's academic concerns, whether it's geography, whether it's weather, whether it's girls, whatever the case may be, he's going to find a reason to decommit. Because the reality is there are some kids who commit to Notre Dame because of parent pressure. They feel that's the decision that their mom and dad want. Not necessarily that parents are making them commit, but it's like, you know, when parents are academics, they love Notre Dame. Parents grown up and remember what Notre Dame was like. You know, so I think that's going to happen, but this thought that, if anything, I think NIL is benefiting Notre Dame because they've always lost big-time kids to that. But and I know and I'm not talking about like guys that are just looking for handouts have never going to come to Notre Dame.
Right, exactly.
But there have been situations in the past where kids wanted to go to Notre Dame, but they came from a poor family. There was an issue at home. Mom was struggling to pay the bills, and Notre Dame couldn't help with that. Such and such school down the road can. Yeah. Now Notre Dame can help with that, right? Legally with NIL stuff. And so, if anything, I think this thing helps Notre Dame. It's the same conversation I had with Rob Babers the other day. There's this thought that all these schools are offering NIL money, and Notre Dame is just kind of sitting back with their hands tied, not doing anything. And that's not true. What Notre Dame is struggling with right now is letting the audience that they've kind of decided, hey, we're gonna sell our opportunities to recruits, but they're not really interested in selling it to the rest of the world like other programs are. So they don't put it out on social media. They don't put it out on this. Like they should have made a much bigger deal. They made a hire recently of someone who's going to be a part of sort of this program. And they put it out on Twitter, but it wasn't like a big announcement, right? And that's the messaging part is where I think Notre Dame is falling behind. But once kids are willing to hear what Notre Dame has to say, they're sold, right? Because they're seeing it. They're talking to Kyle Hamilton during a visit, or they're talking to Michael Mayer or the Adamiola twins or Foskey and say, hey, this NIL stuff's concerning me, man. I don't know what Notre Dame's doing or whatever. But then they're like, well, wait a minute, you made how much? You got a $40,000 signing bonus for real? Like Babers was talking about this thing for the offensive lineman in Texas. That's got a real cute, catchy name. You go to visit Notre Dame and you talk to their offensive line, like, dude, we've got this deal. We've got Mission Barbecue. We've got this. We've got this. We've got this. We've got this. Yeah, we're making bank. All of us.
Right. Yeah,
and that's only going to increase now that Harry Hiestands here and they start actually becoming imagine what happens if Notre Dame's a Joe Moore finalist again this year.
Right.
Right. And that's the whole point. Blake Fisher is going to become a star, right? Joe Walt may become a star. I mean, some of these guys, and all of a sudden it's even more attractive. So if they're going to lose kids because of that, that's a kid that would have 10 years ago still gone somewhere else because they offered him $100,000 or $50,000 or $70,000 or sometimes more than that, if we're being honest. This money in recruiting is not new. Now Notre Dame actually has some to give,
right,
so to speak. I say loosely. So again, Notre Dame has the number one class in the country. They have more top 100 kids committed in Rivals top 25 than most schools have committed, period. Or Rivals top 250 than most schools have committed, period. And so there's no evidence to me that this is going to be this huge damaging thing for Notre Dame. I mean, Notre Dame is on the verge, I think, if they can close, of getting the first 5-star quarterback to sign with them since Gunnar Kiel. And I think we would all agree that Dante Moore's a way better quarterback than Gunnar Kiel. And to your point, Ryan, he is the highest ranked guy, 5-star, would be to commit Notre Dame since Jimmy Clausen. No, actually since Dane Christ. No, Jimmy Clausen, because I don't think Dane was a 5-star, but he wasn't a top 10 kid. Right. So, yeah, since Jimmy Clausen. Assuming he stays where he is. Because back then, they tried to get recruiting rankings right. It was before the clickbait era, where let's move a kid because it doesn't sell as many newspapers, so to speak, right? So assuming he stays based on where his talent should dictate, he would be the highest ranked quarterback commits to Notre Dame since Jimmy Clausen. No question about it. So, and he's doing that. You think Notre Dame's offering him the biggest NIL deal out there? No.
Not up front.
No, exactly. There's no guarantees for Notre Dame. It's, hey, here's the opportunities.
Yeah, that's where the conversation goes, right? It's like what we can do for you, what Notre Dame can do for you.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
A kid that's going to come there has to kind of bet on himself a little bit.
Yeah,
right? But that's always been true. That's always been true.
Guess what? These guys are pretty confident dudes. Like they're willing to bet on themselves.
Right. The ones that come to Notre Dame do. And now there's some kids that I think, with other reasons why that they're going to continue. So yeah, they're going to lose some. Look, they're going to lose some kids because of NIL. It's going to happen, but that's not new. It's just now it has a name to it.
Right. Yeah. It's just been. I feel like there's a common misconception about this, right? It's like there's education that's going to be a part of the recruiting experience now with NIL, and there's going to be a layout of this is how you can best maximize your name, image, and likeness. And this is the long-term outlook of what you can do. I mean, Brian, you just talked about the Will Blackmon tweet, right? Where he just said what a big selling point it is to be the quarterback at Notre Dame. You don't think the quarterback at Notre Dame could make some NIL money, man? Like, let's be serious about this for a minute.
Especially if he's actually really good.
Right, exactly.
Like, let's be honest. If Ian Book would have come back this year, Ian Book would have made bank.
Cleaned up. No question.
I mean, he would have.
He's a winner. He's a winner.
Yeah. Well, he's also a good kid. He's a likable kid.
And there's no question about it. He's an ugly kid. I mean, he's a charismatic guy. There's no doubt about it. Right. Absolutely. He would.
And he's the starting quarterback at Notre Dame. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
There's a brand there. There's a brand. There's money opportunities. Don't be worried about that.
All right, Vince, let's head back to the top. So
Scott has a fun question. If you could go back in time, what is one Notre Dame game you would choose to see? I knew this one was coming.
Mm-hmm.
I've been racking my brain to whether I wanted to go back to
let's say a game in person. Let's say to see a game in person.
Right. But I mean, I'm going back in time.
I'm saying is because you say, well, I watched the Miami game. I'm saying to see a game in person.
No.
So at Notre Dame Stadium or to see a game in person is the premise of how I don't know if that's the case from Scott, but that's how I want to frame the question.
Yeah, no. Well, Notre Dame Miami would be the one I would want to go, the 88 game, right? That's the one I would want to go to in person. Like that would be quote unquote modern. Right, that would be the modern game I would want to go to because I've been to a lot of the ones that are within the last 15 years. That's the one I would definitely want to go to. But then I was toying with going to a Notre Dame Army game in the 20s or something like that. You know what I mean?
Stadium.
Yeah, like back in the day. I think that would be pretty dark. Wear the trench coat with the hat and everything, and I want to go. Be part of that kind of a thing. I think that would be a lot of fun to see football kind of in its infancy, if you will. So those would be the two for me.
How about you, Ryan?
I want to go back to any championship because I was born in 91, so I don't have any recollection in my lifetime.
That's so sad. That makes me so sad. First of all, it makes me feel old because I was old enough to remember the 1988 national championship. And then B, it just makes me sad for Ryan that he just hasn't experienced. I mean, he was 2 in the game that I would pick. The game that I would pick, honestly, is the 93 Florida State game. And here's why. Obviously, the Miami game would have been awesome. But the 93 game, I hated Florida State. But then Charlie Ward made it harder for me to hate Florida State. I loved watching Charlie Ward play. So, I mean, I would have loved to have seen him play in person. But then also, it's kind of like the best of both worlds. Like you always say, I love this kid, and I hope he has a great game every week except when he plays Notre Dame. Right? It's kind of that thing where I would have had a chance to see Charlie Ward play. I would have had because I always felt like the reason I hated Florida State is because they talked like they were the big bad boys on the block, but they never actually were. Even the first year that Bobby Bowden won a title, didn't the team that they beat in the championship game beat the crap out? Like both times they won this national championship, they lost to the team they beat in the championship game in the regular. Or they lost to somebody who should have been the champion, right? Or like Notre Dame, and then they beat Florida in a rematch when Florida pounded them during the regular season, right? I believe that's correct, right? So to me, it's just because if I remember correctly, Florida State and Florida played each other twice in bowl games as well, correct?
Notre Dame and Florida State?
No. Florida State and Florida. Didn't Florida win their championship by beating Florida State, who beat them in the regular season? And was it 96?
I know they won.
The same thing happened when Florida State beat. I'm wrong. I got it backwards. I did it wrong. They beat Virginia Tech to win a championship. Florida State did. But so I got that wrong. So scratch that. Rewind. But I just felt like they talked all this noise, right? And then they get beat by Miami every year. And then they talked all this noise coming to South Bend, and they got beat, right? I just disliked Florida State because it's like they were trying to talk themselves into being great as opposed to going out there and earning it. You know what I mean? And I didn't respect them like I hated Miami, but I respected Miami.
Yeah,
because they were legit. I hated Florida State and I didn't respect Florida State, but that's the one dude that I loved watching play, man. I loved watching Charlie Ward play. So that's why I would have picked that game. That would have been mine.
Was that Marvin Jones a part of those teams in like the Charlie Ward era? Or was that a little after that?
That was I believe Marvin Jones. I thought wasn't Marvin Jones before that?
Was he before that?
Derek Brooks was the linebacker for that team.
Okay.
So he was the stud linebacker for that. Yeah, Marvin Jones. I'm gonna look that up now because I always get that one. Look, Marvin Jones was picked in '93, so he would have been the year before. Now Charlie Ward was a quarterback on that team.
Sure,
but that great '93 team, Marvin Jones was before that. Derek Brooks was the stud linebacker on that team.
Oh yeah,
and he was really good. Go ahead.
I was just curious because I've gotten to know Marvin Jones over the last few years, and we actually text from time to time. That guy's a little crazy, but he's a good dude.
I bet.
I wish on that '93 team. I mean, he was everywhere.
They had some dudes on that team now. I mean, that Florida State 1993 team was no joke.
Now you're getting into the wheelhouse where I remember Notre Dame. Like I don't remember the '88. All of my children are older than I was in 1988. So it's been a while. But when you get to like 93, 92, like that's where my football memories really start to kick in.
Right. Like Ward Dunn was a freshman on that team. Yes. You remember? Oh, yeah. They had Zach Crockett was a fullback on that team. Tamarick Vanover, who's a guy that I really liked as a player. I didn't like him, but he was really good. Clifton Abraham, Devin Bush Sr., Derek Brooks, Corey Fuller, Corey Sawyer. I mean, that team was loaded. Was loaded. But so was Notre Dame. And that's the thing is like there's this perception like Notre Dame just had a bunch of big physical linemen and they out physical. Like they had Jeff Burris, Tom Carter, Bobby Taylor on that team. I mean, like that. They had Derek Mays on that team. I mean, they had some dudes on that. Aaron Taylor was a starting offensive lineman team. Bryant Young was on a team. Like Notre Dame had dudes too. It's just, their dudes were, didn't get the hype. And that's, again, it goes back to why I hated Florida State so much. It's because like they were more, they weren't as much substance. Like Miami's like, hey, you guys talk too much. Well, we back it up. Right? If you don't want to talk, do something about it, right? Back then, the only team that could do something about it was Notre Dame, and then Bama did, and that was in '92. Bama did something about it, but Notre Dame was the only team that could do something about it. Like Florida State was like, they talked all that noise, and it's just like, Miami, Notre Dame. Every time they, got a chance to play them, they smacked them, and it was annoying. But I would have been the game. So. That also adds to another reason I would have liked to have been at the game because I would have liked to watch Florida State lose in person. And I've actually been able to experience that a couple times. Yeah, and, it was very nice. Very nice. So, because the first time I got to see Notre Dame and Florida State play in person, Notre Dame lost. It was the first two times. I was at that bowl game in 2011. Again, another reason why that game ticked me off so much, the Champ Sports Bowl. And then I was at the game in 2014 in Tallahassee. I was covering the game where I thought they had the game won. And then the rest were like, nah, we got this, Florida State. Don't worry about it. We're going to call a pick, So, yeah, I was the next couple times they, played, they smacked them pretty good. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. That.
Oh, man, that pick play, that still drives me crazy, that pick play.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, Quinn Kibler. I'm going to throw this one up there, even though I have no idea who I would pick to go up against Notre Dame. But actual question, what other coaching staff could stand a chance against ours in flag football? Also formerly known as Q-Kibs 97. Wanted to make sure you didn't think I bailed on y'all.
Yeah, no, we got you.
Notre Dame's got a pretty athletic staff. I mean,
and young. They're young.
Yeah, and they got dudes that can play all over. Like they got linemen, they got quarterbacks, they got running backs, receivers,
it anyway. I mean, that's no big. It's, you just snap the ball. But they got some dudes all over the place.
Chancey Stuckey looks like he can still play. Yeah. Tommy looks like he can still play.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Like, Marcus Freeman looks like he can still line up and put the pads on and smack a dude. You know what I mean? Yeah. Coach Mick looks like Chris O'Leary's still old enough to be a player. Like BYU's got guys Chris O'Leary's age. You know what
exactly.
I mean? So
Chris
Hunter Renfro was Chris O'Leary's age when he finished his career at Clemson. You know what I mean?
Are we allowed to go dip into the analyst pool too? Because that
Oh yeah, got Chris Watt, James Laurinaitis. Yeah. I'm all about it. I'm all about it.
Here.
Yeah, that linebacking core, right? Who are your linebackers? Hey, and let's not forget Notre Dame's defensive coordinator's catching passes because he was a tight end. Our goal was a tight end.
True.
right? So, yeah, I mean, it'd be a heck of a linebacking core, right? You got Marcus Freeman and James Laurinaitis. Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that. Yeah, I'll take that.
Coach McCullough could get downhill too,
Yeah,
not the flag football
He's still in
game,
great
but
shape. Yeah,
right?
Yeah, no doubt. And the nice thing is they have enough young guys that they could actually play longer, because that's going to be the key. There's some stuff like, hey, I still got it for 2 snaps, baby. You know what I mean?
Durability is key.
Yeah.
I'll put it out there. I think the IB staff versus any other staff in the area, we got it. Just saying.
Did anybody?
I'm trying to think of any. I mean,
I was about to say something that was going to come across mean, and I didn't mean it to be. But did anybody play football on those other staffs?
I don't know. I mean,
Priester was a baseball guy, right? Tim was a baseball guy. I wouldn't want to take that. Well, yeah.
I'm just saying. Good about our chances.
I'm probably have to run around. As long as I'm all-time quarterback, I'm good. I'm good.
Nobody can stop me. That's all I have to say. So.
Yeah. See.
Yeah. Well, we got the young dudes. You know, that's my only concern. Like, you look at BGI, right? Or not BGI. What are they now? On 3 or whatever. My problem there is they're so young. They're all young. They're like kids. Yeah. Like,
yes, they are young.
I'm worried about the stamina. Like, we gotta limit the number of plays, right? Like, we gotta make it a shorter game. You know, because we may smack them in the first half, but in the second half, and I'm like, you know what I mean? Vince is keeled over, ready to pass out, ready having a coronary.
I think those guys are more
2-year-olds are still running around with all this energy. That's my only concern.
Those guys are more like cross-country runners than they are football players.
Yes.
So that's what I was saying. Like, you know, did anybody play football? I wasn't trying to say that like in a snarky manner. Just was like,
well, I was,
you know,
but you know, but you're right. They are younger. There's no question. I feel very old when I'm around those guys.
Yeah.
Like, they are young. There's no doubt about it. But I'll take our group. I'm just saying. Okay. John A1 says, what position groups do you project being elite in 22?
Anybody want to take a first crack at that? Ryan, you want to take a first crack at that?
I mean, we just talked about it the other day, right, Vince? I think the defensive line has a very good opportunity to be elite.
Yeah.
Isaiah Foskey, Jason Amalola coming back. Justin obviously took a nice step forward last season, but then you have a lot of potential, I think, underneath that, right? With the Howard Crosses, what does Riley Mills look like? Maybe playing strong side defensive end or also working inside at points. Like, I think there's a lot of upside with that position. I'm excited to see Alexander Ahrensberger to see if he takes a nice step forward, because the kid has tools. There's no doubt about it. So I think that the depth is very intriguing for Notre Dame on the defensive line. And then you have a star in Isaiah Foskey, and you have another star in Jason Adamalola potentially. Like, there's a lot of upside to that group, in my opinion.
You know, maybe this is just me being overly optimistic, but I feel like the O-line has an opportunity to be elite. I'm just saying, with the right coaching, I've never thought that they lack for talent. I've never thought that. I thought that they were an underutilized, undercoached group. I think the offensive line can be elite. I do. Again, maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, but with Patterson coming back and with a healthy Fisher, I mean, just down the line, right? And I'm a huge Joe Alt fan. I just feel like this O-line could be mentioned and by elite, I mean like top 5, top 10 O-line in the country.
Because I mean,
if we just break it up, Brian, just offensive tackles, offensive guards. Like, I think the offensive tackles could be elite next season if they take a step forward.
And
right?
they might have the best center in the country next year too. I mean, you know what I mean? So I mean, Vince, it's not that, like, you know, it's the Kool-Aid or whatever, but I mean, it's also objectively there's I mean, Joe Alt was a freshman All-American, right? We didn't vote on that, right? Somebody else did, and there's no one on the planet that would say he's more talented than Blake Fisher was.
Right. Good point. Yeah,
and Jarrett Patterson, as I said, is one of the best returning centers in the country, if not the best. And now he's going to get coached by the best. So yeah, I mean, how many teams can take a guy? And think about this: how many teams can take a guy who's a 6th-year senior, returning starter, started every regular season game last year, and say, "Hey, man, we're going to move you inside because you're not as good as the young dudes we have coming up," right? And that's what they're basically probably going to do with Josh Lugg. So I think the lines. I'm going to go a couple areas that I think have a chance to be elite. Number one, it's hard for me to say the tight end is not elite already, because you have arguably the best tight end in the country coming back and in great depth, right? I mean, you have good players behind it, right? Like, I'd have to go there as already being there.
Fair.
And then I think another one that has a chance for me is the running back room. Because if we're going to say elite is like what, like to me, it's like kind of like the top 5 to 8 groups in the country. Do I think that Notre Dame's running backs have a chance to be? Now, am I putting them there now? No, because they have to prove it. But would I be shocked if by the end of the year we're talking about Notre Dame being absolutely one of the 10 best running back rooms in the country? I won't be shocked by that. Would either one of you guys be shocked by that?
No.
And then another one, and Ryan, I really want to get your view on this. What would it – because you're a lot higher on Brandon Joseph than I am. Do you think if he's as good as you think he is, that the safety room has a chance to become that? Because, you've got – because if you look at like the beginning of last year, it was like Kyle Hamilton was elite, but then there were questions about what's after that. It was him, then Houston, then DJ Brown. Well, there's a chance this year that those guys are further down the depth chart than they were when last year started.
Sure.
Which is kind of interesting to me. And so you don't have a Kyle Hamilton anymore, but now you have Brandon Joseph. So you've got Ramon Henderson moved over. You've got Xavier Watts moved over to the point where, if Houston Griffith is going to be in the top 3, he's going to have to play a whole lot better than he was last year. So what you've seen of Brandon Joseph is if he's the guy you think he can be, how far away is the Notre Dame safety room from being that type of group? I'm not saying they are. I'm just really curious because I wouldn't put him there because I don't think Brandon Joseph is an elite player. I think he's good, and I think this could be a really good group. But if he's as good as you think he's going to be, then that would change my opinion a little bit. And I want to get your thoughts on that.
No, it's a great question, a great point. I think one thing that's going to be huge for the room, because I am a big Brandon Joseph guy. I think that he's an All-American candidate. I do. 9 interceptions the last 2 years. He's got great ball skills. The 2021 season was not as good as 2020, but I think, again, on a bad football team with Northwestern, at least on the defense, just a bad football team in general, he was pressing a little bit at times, and he was kind of trying to do a little too much. I think when he is in a vacuum in his space, in his game, and not pressing, I think that he's a very good football player, potentially elite. And I think he was elite in 2020. 2021, I think he was still very good, but I don't think that he was in that elite status. But I think he has shown us that he can get there. Now, the big thing that's going to make that determiner for me, Brian, and to answer your question, it's possible, but in this sense that Kyle Hamilton obviously being out the last fraction of the season for Notre Dame was tough, right? Because he was obviously a great football player, but it did reward younger players an opportunity, right? Like we saw Ramon Henderson play a lot of snaps.
It also forced position moves.
Yes.
I don't know if they would I don't know if they move Ramon Henderson if Kyle Hamilton doesn't get hurt.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's another great point. But I think that I don't want to call it a blessing in disguise because, obviously we never want anybody to get injured and it was a terrible thing. But I think it does help the long term to a degree because you got Ramon in a new position where he seems to be more comfortable and at least maybe more upside, I guess, is maybe how I would term it. And Xavier Watts obviously got a lot of playing time down the stretch, and he showed, I thought, big-time ability on the back end too. You only need one of those players, in my opinion, to take a big step forward, like a massive step forward. If one of them does, and an Xavier Watts or Ramon Henderson, whoever I don't want to call him an odd man out, but whoever the third guy is, now becomes a really good role player and still a good football player. And then on the top of that, you still have guys like DJ Brown and Houston Griffith who have played a ton of football and have a good baseline. Then I think you can argue that it's elite. But you need, obviously, a couple things to go your way. You need one of those younger players to take a big step, and you need Brandon Joseph to be the player that you think he can be. If both those things align, then I think they can be elite. But obviously, there's a couple things that need to go in your favor if you're Notre Dame.
That's interesting. Yeah. And I think it has a chance. But that's the encouraging thing is it's not going to take a giant, like, oh my gosh, everybody playing out of their minds. Because that's true of anybody. We could do that with any position for any team. Well, if these guys all play out of their minds and above their level, then yes, they can be elite. We're talking about groups that if they play to their potential. And I would actually argue if everybody plays to their potential, I don't even know if D-line's the best position group on the team, to be honest with you. I think we can have that conversation. Just God-given ability. I think they just have a lot of really good players. those guys got to prove that early. I did want to point something else out. We were talking about the defensive line earlier.
Yeah.
Yesterday, you guys had said, Vince said, I believe, that Isaiah Foskey and Jason Adamiola were out for the spring. That was my fault. This is another reason you don't text and drive. I was on my way to the airport. I gave Vince sort of the notes, and I wanted him to talk about it, and I left out Isaiah Foskey limited and Adamiola out.
Gotcha.
So there's a chance that Jason Adamiola is probably out for the spring as far as like being in part of contact, stuff like that. And I've heard there's a chance Isaiah Foskey could be, just depending on how they may choose to limit him, because he did have some, just a couple things. He's recovering from some season stuff that he played through, and they kind of know what he's going to do. So he may not be like out there like he was last year during the spring. So I just want to make sure that we clear that. That was my fault. Vince was just kind of reading what I did. I looked at my notes, said Isaiah and Jason out. That was on me. So that's my fault. But I just wanted to clear that up of why that was said yesterday. So again, one of the many reasons you don't text and drive is because you end up saying something like, that's not what I meant to say. So I do sincerely apologize for that, but we were able to kind of clear that up. Mm-hmm. Demetrius Rex. It's April 23rd. The spring game is happening. Rank the 3 position groups you're most excited to see in action. So it kind of carries on last question, but not so much the best, but who you're most excited to see in action. I know one for me is definitely going to be the same as what we just talked about. And so offensive line for me, Ryan, is one for sure that I'm excited to see. Quarterback is my other one that I'm excited to see. And I'm really excited to see the linebacking core and who's going to line up where. I know you're super high on Marist, and I remember even before last year, you were talking to me about, before my sources at Notre Dame were talking to me about Marist, you were talking to me about Marist and what you thought he could be. That's the other one that I'm really, really excited to see. So O-line, quarterback, linebacker are the 3 rooms, the position groups I'm really looking forward to seeing. Ryan, what would your group be?
Yeah, we have some similarities there. Offensive line for me, mostly because, as far as I know, like they're going to be full go, right? So we got to get to see the meshing. We get to see Coach Easton working with them, obviously, again. We get to see the maturation of some of the younger players that we saw last year. And even inexperienced players like, Andrew Kristofic, like taking a big step forward, Jared Patterson getting to work under Harry Easton. So I'm excited about the offensive line for sure. I'm excited about the wide receiver room. I am working with, because I want to see what the growth is that they have with Coach Stuckey in just that short amount of time in those few practices, right? Like I want to see the maturation throughout the spring, because I think that people are undervaluing a little bit, Brian, just the talent that is in that room. Like I think there's a lot of talent there, man. Like Deion Colsey and Lorenzo Styles, and there's some dudes there, man. And I think that we're starting to get away from that stigma that like Notre Dame doesn't have great wide receiver talent, right? We talked about this yesterday after Kevin Austin blew up the combine a little bit. Like there's talent in that room, and I'm excited to see some of that young talent kind of take that next step, along with obviously the tutelage of guys like Avery Davis, who's returning from an injury. And I think that they're going to take a massive step forward. I'm stuck a little bit on defense between linebacker and safety, because we talked about it again, right? Like there's going to be a little bit of a limiting factor on the defensive line with Foskey limited to a degree. Adamiola most likely out for the spring. So like you're not going to see 2 of the best players up front for Notre Dame. But linebacker, I'm excited about it because like you said, I was a huge fan of Marist going into the year last year. And then when you heard the steps he took last spring, I was like, oh man, it's coming. Mm-hmm. It's coming to fruition right now. And then of course the injury unfortunately happened. So him paired with JD, who I thought had a really nice first season, for kind of getting thrust into a tough situation after the injury. He was very productive, over 100 tackles. And you got all these young guns coming in, the 4 early enrollees at linebacker. I want to see what that room looks like, but I'm really excited about the safety room too. And we just talked about that one highlighting. I'm excited to see Brandon Joseph out there, see how quickly he can take on a leadership role on the back end, because him and Cam Hart are going to just be the de facto. They're going to be the leaders of that group, along with Clarence Lewis, because they've just played a ton of football on the college level now at this point. So I want to see how that safety room evolves, especially if Xavier Watts sticks in the safety room, because I think that there's just a lot of upside with that room and a lot of maturation that could happen in those few spring practices.
Brandon Joseph is one player I'm really looking forward to seeing, because he's one of those guys like, I want you to be right on that one. You know what I mean? And just because if he's as good as you think he can be, that changes some things. It really does. It changes some things for this defense moving forward because, like I said, no, he's not Kyle Hamilton. No one's claiming that he is, but it's just more – I think the sidekicks are going to be better this year than what Kyle had last year, in my opinion. So it's going to be fun to watch all that. But, yeah, there's some talented groups for Notre Dame. They just got to take that next step, right? Like because a lot of them have talent but, right? It's the O-line. There's talent but, right? Receiver, you're right. There's talent but. Right, it's got to do this. Tight end. Behind Mayer, there's talent, but they got to do. Running back, safety, corner, linebacker. It's like the only group you can quarterback. The only group you can sit there and say like, yeah, I expect that group to be pretty good based on what we've seen is the defensive line. And that's really it. So, but that's what makes this part of the year so fun, is because we're gonna have a better idea with some of these guys by the end of spring, and then of course going through fall camp. And so that's what I'm looking forward to.
And I would throw in there too, Brian. Obviously, it's not a position group, but I'm just excited to see the sophomore class, the rising sophomores this year, right? The 2021 recruiting class it would be, because you saw a lot of guys, obviously, for Notre Dame last year flash. Like you saw Logan Diggs, you obviously saw Lorenzo Styles, and you saw the two tackles, obviously, more obviously Joe Alt and Blake Fisher being limited a little bit. And you saw the potential that a quarterback like Tyler Buckner could have. So now, having those players, I mean, usually you take a massive step, obviously, from freshman to sophomore year. I mean, that class is one of the better freshman class I can remember in recent memory, as far as like getting guys on the field as true freshmen.
All the guys you just mentioned were offensive guys, right? And that's what made that class so good. Now, there's some guys on defense I want to see, Prince Colley and Gabriel Rubio, but what made that, Ryan Barnes is a guy I really like, but that was an outstanding offensive class. And you mentioned, you didn't mention him just now, but you mentioned him earlier, Deion Colsey, right? Another guy from that class. Audric Estime. Kane Barong, from what I'm told, was like pushing to get on the field last year when he hurt his knee. You know what I mean? So, like, he's another one. Is he coming back? Rocco Spindler. Is he going to push at guard? I mean, so, like, there's not a dude. Jaden Thomas is a guy that I've heard people rave about. There's not a guy on that offensive group. Mitchell Evans is a guy that I said, why are they signing Mitchell Evans? And he goes out there and earns playing time as a true freshman. You know what I mean? Like, there's not a guy in that class you look and say, that guy can't really play. As far as like maybe a lineman, right? The fifth offensive lineman may be that guy. You know what I mean? But that was a really good group, Ryan. You're absolutely right. It's going to be fun to watch that group's maturation from year one to year two.
Yep. Here's
a question. Hulk Strongest. What's up, guys? What kind of workload do you think Chris Tyree will get, and do you think he has the chance to set the yards per rush? I would imagine the yards per rush record if we think how good this O-line, if the line's as good as we think it will be. So first part, workload for Chris Tyree, Ryan.
I would say I'm just trying to do the math in my head real quick. So I would imagine that an emphasis will be put on to get Chris Tyree the football, obviously, in the passing game as well. And I thought we saw that a little bit at Oklahoma State, obviously, on that little like choice route that he ran. I would say 150-ish carries, maybe more, depending on how many games he plays, and another 40 receptions sounds about right to me. So we're close to about 200 touches, I think, on the season would be pretty good if we're mixing in guys like Logan Diggs, Audric Estime, and maybe Jadarian Price gets a little time here and there. So I think 200 touches would probably be a good number, maybe more, depending on, again, how many games he ends up playing in.
I think the workload depends on how you use him. I think if you're just going to run him inside zone all day, then no, his workload's not going to be as good. If you're getting him in space more often and you're allowing him to do things where he is catching the ball in space, like you talked about, Ryan, with the game against Oklahoma State, it's not just the little choice route that went for 52 yards, but he finished with over 110 yards receiving that game, which meant that 53-yard touchdown wasn't all he did. First play of the game, just a little check down swing. Downfield routes weren't open, just swing it over to Chris Tyree. He runs for 20 yards. So what makes him unique is you can completely shut him out in the run game, and he can still impact the game if you use him correctly. So as long as some of his the more of his touches that are in space, the more of the volume you can handle. And I think that also ties into how good the offensive line can be, because there are going to be some inside zone runs with this line that he doesn't get touched. You know what I mean? And I think that's the thing too. So yeah, I'm kind of like I'm a 15 touches a game guy for Chris Tyree on offense. And I don't care if it's 8 carries, 7 catches, 12 carries, 3 catches. I don't care, but he should be getting minimum 12 to 15. Like minimum is like an average of 12 to 15 carries a game. Minimum 10 to 12 carries a game. Minimum. The average needs to be 12 to 15. Because here's the thing: if the this is to Hawk's question, if the line's as good as we think it is, he won't need 20 carries to get to where he needs to get to. Right? Let Logan Diggs and Audric Estime handle that type of role. Let them be the bulk carries guys, the high volume guys. And then mix Chris Tyree into where Chris Tyree can do as much from a production standpoint with 7 carries as the other backs in the roster can do with 15. It's not that he's better or worse; it's just a different skill set. And then, do you think he has a chance to set the yards per rush record? I believe George Gipp has that record. And it's something absurd like 8-something yards a carry. No, I don't.
I'm assuming that needs like a certain amount of rushes, right? Because
and he met it. It's minimum 100 attempts. Yeah, minimum 100 attempts, which is obviously easier in today's era. But you go number 1 was George Gipp at 8.1. Reggie Brooks was at 8.0. Now it helped him having Jerome Bettis to take some of that pressure off. The closest that we've seen really in the Brian Kelly era, Josh Adams has had 2 really good years. He was at 7.1 yards per carry in 2015, and then he was at 6.9 in 2017, and he was a home run hitter. Well, Josh Adams is a full 1/10 of a second slower at least than Chris Tyree is now. So has he got a chance at it? I think he's got a chance to get to 7+. I mean, he was at 6'8" as a freshman. Right. But usually with more carries, because a 90-yard run, when you have fewer carries, is going to more greatly impact your yards per carry. Then you add more of those 4 and 5s, which comes with more bulk. So I think he's got a chance to get definitely into the 7s. It's hard for me to say he can break the record because, number one, I guess I need to see the line first. I need to see how they're going to use him. But could he be one of the big game changers in college football? Yeah, I think he can. I think the interesting thing for Chris Tyree, for me, Ryan, is more about where's he going to rank when his career is over. Like that's more of the thing for me because when you look at the yards per carry for the careers, if we're even having a conversation about Chris Tyree being in there this year, he's going to have a chance to do something. His current career mark is 5.6. because of how low last year was, but he still only has 129 career touches at that 5.6. If he's in the highest, if he gets to 7 this year and he does similar things in 2024, all of a sudden he's going to be in that conversation. Josh Adams is 3rd all time at 6.7.
Wow.
Reggie Brooks has got the best at 7.6, which is just absurd to go through 4 years at Notre Dame, 3 as a running back. During the era he played in when they played just really good teams and averaged 7.6 yards per carry. Good night. That's
crazy.
That's really impressive.
Yeah.
All right, Benjamin.
It's kind of stupid,
go ahead.
Man. That
it's
yard per carry
like,
is a little stupid.
Yeah. It's like I'm more about, hey, let's set a standard for what he needs to be at as opposed to setting a record because some of the records are just, When George Gipp, the Gipper, has a record, it's like, I'm not asking you to beat that record. I'm just get me to 7, right? I don't care about beating a Gipper. Just get to 7. Benjamin Weiss with a question. Predictions, tight ends and O-line aside, what is the next position group on offense that Notre Dame has the best chance of becoming the school for? So like tight end U, O-line U. What's the position that Notre Dame would have the best chance of becoming the school for?
I mean, I hope it's quarterback U, right?
Right.
Like that's where I wanted to go. But
right.
I mean, I would say, like, I think that there's a lot of room in the wide receiver. I think there's a lot of talent in the wide receiver room right now. And I think that Notre Dame has the opportunity to really pull in a really good 2023 class potentially. So I guess that would be my pick. Maybe running backs like on the top of my mind. But I mean, for the future of Notre Dame, I mean, again, Tyler Buckner, hopefully he hits his ceiling. If you are able to land a Dante Moore in the 2023 class, then that's the next guy. Like, hopefully it's quarterback because that's just kind of been one of the missing cogs in the program recently. But I would probably defer to wide receiver, I guess, for a more realistic approach, I guess.
I'm gonna agree with you, but then add more something to it too. Is the one thing the receiver room can do if Notre Dame's making the school for that argument is they can point to recent history and add to it, right? Like if let's say Kevin Austin plays himself into a day 2 or early day 3 pick, just for example, right? And then, Lorenzo Styles has a chance to be something. Let's say Braden Lindsey has a good year and he gets picked next year. He's not going to get picked high, but let's say he gets drafted next year. But then you talk about Deion Colsey, Lorenzo Styles. Those are guys that have a chance to become high draft picks. If you get Dante Moore and it has the effect that we think it will, and if Tyler Buckner's the player that I think he's going to be this year, all of a sudden you start landing these Cornell Tates and the Braylon Jameses, and then it becomes that thing. At 4 or 5 years down the road, you can then look back and say, hey, let's not forget that this school also produced Golden Tate, who won the Biletnikoff. It produced Michael Floyd, who was a first-round pick. It produced Will Fuller, who was a first-round pick. It produced Chase Claypool, who was a second-round pick. Miles Boykin, who was a third-round pick. And let's not forget that Notre Dame's receivers have just blown up the combine like every time they get a chance to do so, right? So I think that's the reason I also think you're correct on Ryan, is not just looking forward, is there the opportunity for that? But then also you can bring in kind of recent history to that equation too, because Notre Dame has had some high draft picks to receive. Not the volume of other teams, which is why they're not, the school for wide receivers yet. But running back, when was the last time Notre Dame had a running back drafted higher than the 6th round? It's been a while. I think it might actually be Reggie Brooks. It's been a while.
What was Julius Jones, like a 3rd-round pick, wasn't
That's
he?
right. He was a 2nd or 3rd rounder. You are correct. I forgot. How can I forget the Virginia guy? Yeah, Julius Jones was, but like Dex was a 6th-round pick. Adams was undrafted. Theo was a 6th-round pick. Sierra was undrafted. Jonas Gray was undrafted. Armando was undrafted. Darius Walker went undrafted. Yeah, Julius was. Ryan Grant went undrafted. Julius Jones was a 2nd or 3rd, I think a 2nd-round pick. I could be wrong on that.
It was definitely day 2. It was 2nd or 3rd.
Right. Day 2 now, obviously. It was day 1 back then, right?
Wow. Was it?
But because there was only 2. The draft was. See, you're young, right? You're young. It's okay. I understand. You were like 11 when he was drafted. It used to be only. It would start on Friday, and you'd have the first several rounds on day 1, and then day 2 was like 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Someone just said CJ Prosise, though. Was he a 4th rounder? Something like that? 3rd or 4th?
He was 3rd, but I guess, for me, I don't really count CJ as a running back. I guess that's kind of part of the thing for me. He was 2nd-round pick, 43rd overall. I feel like CJ was kind of drafted as more of an athlete than he was really a running back. I don't know. But that's one. Yeah, CJ was a 3rd-round pick of the Seahawks, so that's another one. But every time I think of CJ, I don't think he played running back. I think as an athlete that carried the ball enough to rush for 1,000 yards. You know what I mean? So he was a running back. I'm just saying, I'm not saying that the person who put that's correct. I'm just saying, for me, I don't necessarily see it that. So it makes it kind of interesting. Real quick here from Rob Osgood. Hey, guys, thank you so much for what you do. I understand Marcus Freeman is going to have several players from previous years at the Blue and Gold game. Can former players talk to recruits? Yes, they can. And here's a question from Tyler Evans. Do you guys see a 2 QB system this year? Not if things go well. Meaning they play both of them? No, not if things go well. If it means one of them's not ready. It means Tyler Buckner's not ready yet to be the guy. If that's when they would go with the 2 quarterback system. If Drew Pine wins the starting job, Tyler Buckner's still going to play. Just like this year, right?
Sure.
If Tyler Buckner wins the job, they're not going to play 2 quarterbacks.
Right.
So that would be mine.
Absolutely. I agree.
Now we're going to get down to here, Ryan. Brett Lott said, did you guys see Kevin Austin ran a 4.37 at the NFL Combine? He the official time was 4.43, I believe, correct?
Yep.
But, Kevin Austin blew things up yesterday, Ryan.
He did, man. He did. It was awesome to see. And I was pretty close on those predictions for him, man. I think I said 39-inch vert. I think I only gave him like 10.6 in the broad. He really blew that one up. It was like 11 foot in the broad, which is incredible. The 4.43, I think I said like 4.47-ish, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, you said like 4.47 to 4.54 was the range you gave. Right. He smoked that.
He that whole group yesterday, those wide receivers, man, they were flying in general, but obviously he was flying. The more impressive number, though, and I want to put this into context for a second, because I know we talked about it a little bit this morning, Brian. 6.713 cone, which demonstrates change of direction, right? I think I put like a 6'9" as a prediction for him and that was being generous because I mean, on film, I didn't think Kevin was the most flexible mover as far as like short area stuff. And I mean, and there is a caveat to that. He played around 215-ish, right? 210, 215, somewhere in that ballpark. And he showed up at the combine at 200 pounds, which says...
He also wasn't coached how to run routes. And when you aren't coached how to run routes, you're not going to look super sharp and crisp running routes.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I pulled up the article for you. You had 4.1 to 4.2 on the short shuttle. He had a 4.15. So that was your range. Yep. And on the 3-cone, you had him from 7 to 7.2.
Man, yeah. 671, man. 671 is like that was the best 3-cone of anybody yesterday at the combine by a good margin. By a good margin. Yeah.
Nope, you're not saying it correctly. Okay.
Okay, go ahead, say it.
I'm gonna say it correct because I said this. I'm just joking about it.
Yeah.
The number 15, like so if you took all the positions yesterday, receiver, tight end, because there were some tight ends that actually had top 10 3-cone numbers yesterday. If you took all the guys that ran the 3-cone yesterday, the number 15 guy was closer to the number 2 guy than the number 2 guy was to Kevin Austin.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
Yes.
That's absurd. That's like winning a 100-meter sprint by like 10 steps. I mean, that's an absurd domination of that man. He also, Ryan, this is something I looked up today when I was writing my article about just how Kevin Austin's performance is just the latest example of Brian Kelly's full of crap when he kept talking about they lack explosiveness on the perimeter. No, you don't know how to use the explosive players you have. That's the problem. It's not the players. It's you. You're the problem. He was the only receiver to rank in the top 5 in all in vertical, broad, shuttle, and 3-cone. Only one.
Crazy.
Only one. And so that's a strong all-around performance.
Oh, no. And I mean, honestly, you can make an argument because I know everybody obviously lost their minds with the Christian Watson kid from North Dakota State who had a great day in his own right, but like he didn't run the short shuttle or 3-cone. And there's a reason that he didn't run the short shuttle or 3-cone. You know what I mean? So what you can really make an argument that Kevin had the best day of any wide receiver. And then he went into the position drills and he plugged everything. He was consistent. And drops are on film for him. So seeing the hand-eye coordination and just the consistency through the catch, like everything was really good for Kevin Austin yesterday. And we talked, obviously, it's huge for him because the tape is up and down. So you needed that type of performance. And I mean, I said on my podcast this morning for the NFL draft, like I am more convinced now that Kevin Austin could go 3rd to 4th round than I am that he lasts into the 7th round. Like it's much more likely that he goes in that 3rd to 4th round range. And when we put that into context with the testers we've seen, because I expected him to test great, but let's put this into perspective. The last 3 wide receivers now that are going to be drafted from Notre Dame. You talked about Chase Claypool, who was 6'4 plus and 229 pounds. I think he weighed in at the combine off the top of my head, ran like 4.42, had like a 41-inch vert, just silly stuff. And then Miles Boykin, a couple years after, bests him in basically every category. He runs 4.43, which is the same time as Kevin Austin, so slightly slower, 43.5-inch vertical. And I believe he was over 11 in the broad as well. He was just a springy, ridiculous athlete. So, yes, let's get this misnomer out of the way.
Right.
That there's no talent in the wide receiver room. And I kind of
talked
about that a little bit earlier.
There's no speed. I put this out there. So, being fair, Justin Ross probably won't run a great 40 time now, like his pro day, than what he would have had he not been injured, right?
Sure.
You felt that in his prime, he probably would have been like a high 4.3 to low 4.4 guy, right? So let's say he was a 4.3 guy. Okay. The Clemson receiving corps in 2018, their top 4 receivers were Justin Ross, T. Higgins, Hunter Renfrow, and Amari Rodgers. You had Justin Ross would have been a high 4.3, low 4.4. Amari Rodgers was a 4.52. T. Higgins and Hunter Renfrow both ran 4.59s. Notre Dame's top 4 receivers on that team, Miles Boykin was a 4.42. Chase Claypool was a 4.42. Kevin Austin was a 4.43. And Chris Fink was a 4.56.
Yeah. Yep.
And they had Braden Lindsey on that team that they just didn't use.
Who's a 4.4 kid as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So it just makes Kelly's postgame, we don't have enough explosive playmakers, even more absurd. it was an excuse last year when Braden and Austin were hurt. I bought it more last year. You had Skoranek and John Vomick. They weren't explosive players, right? I understand that. Last year was a little bit of an exception because of the injuries. But it's total nonsense. And, it puts his numbers into perspective. And you made I liked your comment. You said there's a reason that guy didn't run the shuttle or the three cone, right? Yep. There's a reason Chris Olave didn't run that because he's been training to blow up at the 40, and then he's going to then reshift. He's not going to run the 40 at his pro day, and he's only going to do the other drills because now the training shifts to getting those numbers right? I mean, am I wrong? That's kind of how that works with those top picks, right?
No, it is. It is. You're usually, I mean, they're practicing everything, but you're usually, you understand where your niche is, right? And we especially saw this a couple years ago with the whole DK Metcalf thing, right? He runs 4.3. He kind of gets into the short shuttle and the three cone. He's not super prepared and he's a little stiff. I mean, just from a stylistic perspective, and he goes there and he runs it poorly. And a little bit of what had to do with the recurring things with the neck injury that he had the year that obviously earlier in that season, but he had been medically cleared and he still fell because people were like, oh, well, can he change direction? Well, does it really matter for his role? And if he wouldn't have ran those numbers, like you could just be like, nah, I'm
and
good.
His route running was crap. He was also a guy that was not taught how to play the game in college.
It was not. No, you're absolutely correct. And honestly, Brian, like people are going to find this a little dishonest, I'm sure, but this is how it works right now. I'm not prepared to run that drill. I'll do it at the pro day. And then a day before the pro day, your hamstring's a little tight. You know what I'm saying? So, and
hey, we saw this at Notre Dame last year. Jeremiah Wusu's got a hamstring that keeps him running to 40, but he did everything else. He did stuff that was going to be way more problematic than the hamstring. Why? Because as I told you a year ago, Jeremiah's not going to run to 40. Why? Because everybody at Notre Dame tells me he's not a good 40 guy. He's going to be a 4.6, 4.7 guy. For whatever reason, the 40-yard dash is not his thing, right? And no one would ever. And I've said that to people. They didn't believe. There's no way he's that slow. You watch his film. That's because he does. How often does he just get in a stance and run 40 yards in a straight line, right? Like
everything's short area. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And to your point, Garrett Wilson did do one of those drills. He ran the shuttle, and he ran a 4.36.
Yeah,
which is not bad. But Kevin Austin ran a 4.15.
And he's 6'2" compared to the 5'11" and 6'8" that Garrett Wilson is. Right, exactly.
Because the taller you are, the harder it is to change direction in those type of things.
Exactly.
Which also is what made Miles Boykin's numbers that day just stupid. Now, Miles also benefited. He's so long that when he can plan, it's like 3 steps to everyone else's 5 to get back to the other side.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's part of it too. Kevin's not that long. He's in that middle ground where it's like almost like his height is like kind of damaging for those drills. Not long enough to make up for it with stride, but he's also too long to really be sudden and out of those things. So his day yesterday was outstanding. And it just speaks volumes to A, the athleticism, but B, Matt Balis has done a phenomenal job. Because here's the deal. All these kids are training with specialists, right?
Sure.
But they didn't take a 4.7 Kevin Austin and turn him into a 4.43 in a couple months, right?
Right.
He started with a good baseline. And it's not a coincidence that ever since he's shown up, the numbers have just been through the roof. Because Will Fuller's overall numbers, other than 40, weren't even close to what these guys are doing under Matt Balis. Not even close. And it's really impressive.
And you know who else is a big riser in the wide receiver room that helps Notre Dame in a degree is the fact that the fastest player at the combine thus far is 4.28 by Tyquan Thornton out of Baylor. Who was coached, of course, by Chancey Stuckey. Now, of course, Coach Stuckey isn't making him a 4.28 athlete, but when he gets drafted maybe in the second round, Chancey Stuckey can say, hey, in only 1 year, go look at the 2020 film. I made him from that, which is a good player, not great, into a second-round pick. That is going to be big for him moving forward.
Tyquan Thornton the year before in 6 games, because remember, COVID year, in 6 games had 16 catches for 158 yards, 9.9 yards per carry. That was in 2020. Okay. And then in this past year, he had 62 catches for 942 yards, 15.2 yards per carry, and 10 touchdowns. Now, keep in mind, that's on an offense that very run heavy. Very run heavy. And Ryan, you and I have talked about this in the show before. There was a noticeable improvement in his overall game.
Absolutely.
In that. So yes, it's going to be
and those those numbers are really impressive when you consider that Baylor has 2 running backs that are at the combine. Like they had a couple
Right.
guys, man. Abram
Right.
Smith and Treston Ebner, who were both at the combine, was a really good rushing attack for Baylor this year. So imagine if he played in what was traditionally like an Art Briles style offense where like they're chucking it all around the field. Like he probably has an even better season. So I just think that long-term impact, how Thornton is improved this year, and the fact that he may be drafted a lot higher than people are anticipating right now after running that 4.28, that is going to help Coach Stuckey in the immediate future on the recruiting trail with recruits, because he's going to be saying, look what I did there. I can do that for you. That's easy.
Now you also said that you felt Jack Cohn had a good day yesterday.
I did.
As the combine. Tell people, because I mean, obviously people are just going to look at 40 times, but his 3 cone and shuttle, vert and broad, were all really good. And
they were.
And he threw it well from what you could see as well, correct?
Yeah. He was. I would say he was just super consistent, like you would expect of a Jack Cohn, right? Like I thought a couple early were a little behind. The timing obviously is going to be an issue in those types of settings at first, but I really thought that he settled in and he was throwing good, accurate footballs. And I mean, he didn't do anything to hurt himself in the throwing portion. And I mean, I wrote in the article, right? Like I think he's going to test better than people expect. And I said between a 4.85 and 4.95 or 4.8 and 4.95, somewhere in that ballpark. He ran a 4.9, which is a solid time for 6'3" and a quarter, 218 pounds. He's a bigger quarterback, obviously, not a small guy. And then he verticals. He had a high vertical as Treylon Burks, the wide receiver from Arkansas, with 33 inches. I mean, that is a really nice number. I predicted 32. And then
he was a little bit above what your prediction. He went 33. Yep.
And then that 3 cone, 6.95, that is a good time.
You had 7.2 to 7.35 as the potential range, right?
Yeah.
And what your numbers were, you were predicting what you think they can run, but also projecting what they need to run to kind of impress people as well. And Absolutely. So he went from 7.2 to – put in context, Will Fuller ran a 6.93 in the 3 cone, right? And I think part of Jack's problem this year, and I've said this before, and I think good NFL scouts are going to see this. They're going to see this kid was making a dramatic change in system philosophy. We hear this every year at the combine when these kids that have been shotgun players the whole career are having to do things from understanding. They look awkward doing it. Like we see it every year, Ryan, for like the last 8-9 years, as we've seen more and more of the spread. These kids have no ability to just line up and understand. Jack was making the opposite move, right? Like he had played in the shotgun before, but never exclusively like he did at Notre Dame this year. And I think that, combined with the offensive line stunk, and the receivers weren't really good at getting clean releases, is a part of why I think at times he did look so uncomfortable in the pocket. As he got more comfortable later in the year, you saw his effectiveness skyrocket, where he was completing almost 70% of his passes in the final 6-7 games of the year. And I think teams are going to see that film. They're going and the thing that I thought yesterday too, Ryan, I thought the ball was jumping. His accuracy wasn't great at times early. He had like one of that little short fade that he just threw a little high, carried the guy out of bounds. I thought his go routes were good. The guy needs to catch the ball. I thought the kid played it, but the ball was jumping out. I thought even more like it just was coming out of his hand, just like it was like really coming off. I thought that was impressive as well. I thought Jack had a good day, and then you combine that with he had a really good Shrine Bowl performance, right? Which you wrote about at Irish Breakdown. So he helped himself, and I can't wait to see what Kyron does today. I'm fingers crossed that he's going to put up the numbers that you think he's going to put up. So I don't think the good vibes have ended yet for Notre Dame when it comes to the combine.
No, I mean obviously the last day too, and I know we'll obviously have more of a recap show on it, but I expect Kyle Hamilton to end the week very well for the Notre Dame program this year.
Are you allowed to give just a little bit of a sliver of why you think that? You don't have to give specifics or whatever else if you don't want to, but just kind of. Yeah, because I don't think some people necessarily know where you came from to hear. Like, you're the recruiting guy here, but just, you know what I mean? Like, why you think some of these things and where this information comes from. Because you're not just like, you're not like, I think he's going to run this. You know what I mean? Like,
guy, right.
Yeah.
I mean, so obviously my roots are in the NFL draft world, and I developed a lot of good relationships with a lot of agents, a lot of these training facilities that we're kind of talking about, right? Like Kevin Austin and not Jack Cohn. Kevin Austin was training at Exos. It's Kyle Hamilton as well. They have several locations across the country. Kyron Williams is training at Bommarito, which is in Miami, Florida, which is one of the better facilities as well. So I kind of get some inside tidbits at times. I am told that from someone pretty close to the situation in Exos land, I guess if you want to call it that, that Kyle Hamilton is going to put up some numbers. And I don't think that we should be super surprised that he's going to put up some crazy numbers.
One of them I'm surprised by. Like you and I talk, like I never viewed Kyle Hamilton as he was more rangy than he was just
straight
pure
line.
Fast. I mean, because on your projections, you have him down at like some of the stuff you have like 39 plus inch vertical, 10.6 broad, which is really good. But you had him in the 4.48 to 4.52 range.
Yes.
Because he's more of a cover ground guy than necessarily a pure speed testing guy.
Right, because this is the issue, right? It's like 4.48 at 6'4", 220 is flying. Like that is ridiculous. But I'm told that there is a possibility that he breaks into the 4.3s. This is a real possibility, and I am told that there is a very good chance that he goes over 40 in the vertical and over 11 in the broad jump. And just think about that and to put that in perspective for a second, man. Like that is one of the craziest numbers that we'll ever see, because we'll see. Yes, as far as I know, yes. Sorry, so I just saw a comment come in if he's going to run. Yes, as far as I know, Kyle has been training out in Exos, and he is going to be a full participant in every drill at the combine. So we should see, unless there is something last minute where he chooses not to test, possible. But yeah.
And Ryan, I would say this. I would say the fact that he's choosing to work out with his current draft status is because they think he's going to blow it up.
Yes, exactly.
Because if he was going to wait till the Notre Dame Pro Day, that's almost a month away. Notre Dame's Pro Day is still 3 weeks away. That would give him an extra 3 weeks to kind of improve the numbers a little bit, right? So Kyle's saying, hey, I want to be a top 3 pick. And the way that I can do that is to go blow up the combine, right? And so just so people understand, when you're at these things, they test you. Like they put you through. It's not like you're just working out and then you show up the day of and you're like, gee, I hope I get a 40 good time. You kind of know what you've been doing. You know what your range is, and so that's where the confidence comes from. It's not like, hey, he's been working really hard. Now we hope the first time he runs a 40 at the combine, he's going to do well. No, he's been running 40s. They're training for these type of things. They're not training to go win the Super Bowl on Saturday. These people are training them to blow up the combine, not be the best route runners. Now, some of them will kind of incorporate those. I mean, those things are incorporated into the drills, but it's not. My point is it's not football coaches, right? To the point of they're getting them ready to go play in a 7-on-7 tournament. Is my point. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I would say, I mean, because we even saw Evan Neal is completely healthy from Alabama. He's choosing not to test because he doesn't have to test. He's going to be one of the top couple players off the board. And Kyle could be in the same situation where he just says, I don't need to test. And to answer, actually, I want to pull up Brandon's question about when the performances are. So, Brandon, today, 4:00 Eastern, if you are listening to this, well, you are obviously listening to us now on this Friday. He will be testing today. It starts at 4:00 Eastern on NFL Network. I believe, and don't quote me on this part, I believe offensive linemen start first and then the running backs come in. So it's going to be a little after 4:00, obviously. I guess probably around 6-ish or something in that ballpark, maybe a little even later than that, because there's obviously a lot of offensive linemen because their interior and offensive tackles are grouped together. So it's a bigger group. But Kyron will be today. Tomorrow will be the defensive linemen. Believe Sunday is linebackers and the conversion guys. And then I believe Monday is the defensive backs, if I have that correct. So I believe Monday Kyle will be performing.
Here's a good one. D Beezy, she's trying to get to my heart, Vince, with this, with Ryan with this one. She says, who's your wide receiver breakout player this year? I'm going with Xavier Watts. So she knows how to get me. You know what I mean? Thanks for that, D Beezy. I wish he would be, but I think he's going to be at safety. I think you and I are going to have the same one because, well, we may not have the same one.
Might have a different one. Yeah.
I'm going Lorenzo Styles.
I'm actually not.
And the reason I'm going Lorenzo, because a friend of mine made this, he's like, well, I already feel like we know what Lorenzo could do. He had 100 yards in the bowl game. I said, yeah, but he only had 24 catches on the year, right? It's not like he blew up the whole year. I think Lorenzo's going to be Notre Dame's top pass catcher receiver this year. I don't say that definitively because I think I have kind of leaned towards who you're going to pick as a guy in the past, and I'm curious here why you're going to pick him because I have other reasons why he could be the breakout player too. But I just feel like with what we saw of the reason I'm going is what we saw of Tommy Rees's offense in the final 6 games and the bowl game. I think there's a much greater opportunity that the X and Z get more volume than they've gotten in the past. Because as I've pointed out, the W, going back to 2016, the W has led the offense in either catches or yards, and in most years, both, every year. The exception being this year when Michael Mayer actually led the team in catches, but the W led the team in receiving yards in Kevin Austin. So just that's how the offense has been designed. But I feel like as we saw in the bowl game, the X and the W both had 100 yards because the RPOs and because of the screen game and things like that. I see a chance for Lorenzo to have the kind of volume he needs to be that guy. And that's why I'm going with Lorenzo Styles.
And it's very fair. And I think in the past, I predicted that I thought Lorenzo could be the highest volume getter as far as receiving yards on the team, even over Michael Mayer. Like, I think that that's possible. But I would say he obviously, only 24 receptions, like you're saying, but I think he's just a little more known of a commodity comparative to a Deion Colsey, which is why I would pick Deion, who is projected to be that W, to be in the boundary and do all those types of things, where I think that he is going to have a lot of opportunity and to go from obviously a very small amount of volume last year to potentially 40 catches, 50, somewhere in that ballpark. So I think it's just a little lesser of a known commodity to a very high difference maker comparative to what we have a slight known commodity to a much higher level. If that makes sense.
Because I think the thing you and I are looking at it, and this is what I like about questions like this, is you can take breakout 2 different ways. I'm looking at it from more of a national, like nationally Lorenzo Styles is not a name. I think he can be. If he leads the team in receiving yards, like you said, he becomes a national name. You're more looking at it from the standpoint of a guy that just didn't do anything basically last year to then becomes a really good football player. So I think there's 2 different ways of looking at it. I think at the end of the day, I'm hoping that both of us are right. because and it's possible because, again, you have one guy that's an explosive playmaker. The other guy's going to play the volume position in the Notre Dame offense that I think has a lot of – I mean, Deion's 6'5", 207 is a true freshman. And he's a year younger than just about it, than most kids in his grade, as I've mentioned plenty of times in the show. I feel like he's got a chance to really do something, So, yes, and I think that's why you and I aren't as concerned about receivers maybe some people are, because then the Tobias Merriweather shows up in July, is the numbers are not good, but the talent is. And, look, if Avery Davis wasn't injured, didn't hurt himself and would have gone pro, I guarantee you Avery I'd be shocked if he didn't get a combine invite, number one. And number 2, I'd have been shocked if he didn't run in the 4.4, especially as fast as that a track appeared to be yesterday. Shocked if if Avery's not in the 4.4s, right? Lorenzo's a 4.4 guy. Braden Lindsey's definitely. I think the only debate with him is he a low 4.4 or a high 4.3 guy? I think that would be the debate. There's some juice at receiver for Notre Dame, and none of them can touch the running back in a sprint. You know what I mean? So there's some weapons there that I don't think Notre Dame is getting enough credit for. And I think that some of us have kind of, because the schedule was so bad down the stretch, that we just kind of dismiss how good the offense really was numbers-wise down the stretch, which I understand. But the fact that they had 3 receivers with 100 – you know how many receivers had 100 yards receiving against Notre Dame, against Oklahoma State last year? There were 4 players that have at least 100 yards receiving against Oklahoma State. 4. That's it, whole season.
Yeah.
3 in one game by Notre Dame.
Yeah,
Austin,
three.
Styles, and Tyree all had 100 yards receiving. In 13 games, twice against Tyquan Thornton, against Mario Williams, against all the Big 12 guys. One guy had 100 yards receiving, and it was a kid from I think it was Henderson, right? Xavier Henderson from Iowa State. There's only one.
Hutchinson.
There you go. And the other three were Notre Dame guys against a top 5 defense, right? So you don't, and 2 of those guys are coming back. You know what I mean? And it's not like they shut Michael Mayer out. He had 7 catches for over 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, so I think this team has a chance to be really explosive next year. And that kind of leads us to a question that we had down here too, Ryan, which was it was kind of about scoring 40 points a game. And, is this a team that should be expected to score 40 points a game? And for me, it's expected. There's all types of factors that go into not getting to that point. But, yeah, this is a team that should be a 38-plus point per game team, in my opinion. I think the schedule's good enough to where if they're at 38, 39, that's really good against the teams they play. But what I care more about is that it's a consistently explosive offense. Not you score 17 against Ohio State and then 62 against Marshall, right? Like, okay, you're 40 points a game, but you only scored 17 against the team with a pulse, or the team that you should be playing against. It's like the people say, well, the 2019 offense, man, that was the most points they've scored in regular season ever, and 36 points, most they've scored since Brady Quinn. I'm like, yeah, because they scored 17 against Georgia and went and hung a 59 spot and a 66 spot on New Mexico and Bowling Green. Well, I don't care about that. You scored 14 points against Michigan. You scored 17 points against Georgia. I don't care that you hung half a hundo on BG or 66 on New Mexico. I don't care. You smoked all these crap teams, Stanford and all these other teams that can't defend anybody. It's can you score against the best teams? That's, to me, the thing that's more important than the magical 40 points per game number, in my opinion. Ty B, do you believe Marcus Freeman understands the importance of having an elite quarterback since he played with a Heisman quarterback at Ohio State? I don't think that's why, Ryan. I think he thinks that because he's a defensive coordinator. He knows what a dynamic quarterback can do. That's why I think he feels that way.
Yeah, you want a guy that signal caller for your team that you would have nightmares going against the next day, right? Like that's the guy that you're looking for. So yes, I agree. I think that he understands how much of a difficult task a quarterback can be, and I think that Notre Dame has one on the roster right now. I think that if Tyler Buchner is I think if he is developed properly, he is going to be a headache for defenses with his dual threat ability, the ability he has as both a runner and a passer. And then again, moving forward here, obviously 2023 class, if they land someone like Dante Moore, he is also a headache for different reasons. So understanding that, I think, yes, I think that Marcus Freeman definitely understands how difficult of a task it can be to have a great quarterback in place for other teams.
Yep. Here's a good one. Scott Yerbick says, who has the fastest 40 time in Notre Dame history? So I have been trying to find this because everywhere I've looked, it's Will Fuller, the 4.32. Now, obviously, the Rocket Ismail didn't work out at the Combine, or he would have it. But I have been trying to find Allen Rossum. And I don't know, did he not work out at the Combine maybe coming out? Because I believe he was in the NFL when they still had the NFL fastest man stuff. And he won it once. Like, Allen Rossum could fly. But I don't know if he just didn't have a good Combine or he didn't perform in the Combine. I have no idea. But Allen Rossum would have been the other guy that I would have had that I would have, like, when I'm, like, looking in, how guys did, he would have been one that I would have thought to look up his numbers to see what that would have would have meant.
He must not have performed at the Combine because there's definitely ways to find it. I just Googled it. I can't find anything either. Yeah. So I'm going to assume he did not test.
Yeah. So, I found an article about him being invited to the Combine, but I have nothing about what he did at the Combine.
What do you think? What do you think Rocket would have ran? Did you say
he would?
I may have missed it.
He would have, to me, would have ran in the mid to low 4.2s, in my opinion.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And there was reports about him running like in the high 4.1s. But no, I think Rocket would have been a 4.2 guy for sure. Like, for sure.
And Fuller was what? 4.31?
4.32. 4.32.
Yeah.
His official time. I think he ran like a 4.31, like, on the NFL Network thing. And 4.32 was his official time. Yeah. So I'm trying to think some other guys that would have been in that conversation, just because there's been some pretty speedy guys at Notre Dame over the years. But yeah, Will Fuller obviously is the one that what I've been able to find had the fastest reported 40 time for Notre Dame. So
it's going to be interesting when Tyree makes the jump because I know he's rumored to be like a 4.3 guy. And
he's ran in the 4.2s before.
Wow.
I mean, and when he was a sophomore and a junior, he had the fastest, I think it was 55-meter indoor time in the country. Not for football players, but anybody.
track.
And so his 100-meter dash times were good. They weren't quite as good as his indoor stuff, which is going to be more indicative of a 40-yard dash time, the shorter sprints.
Yes.
Right. And so
because he's a little bit of a shorter guy, he's not a long guy.
Right.
Usually the guys that are the really good sprinters, like you see some shorter sprinters, but there's usually guys that have
Maurice
a
Green
bit of a
was on the shorter
length.
side, right? Yeah.
Right.
But they're not
usually
most of them
that has you have a kick, you have stride length at the end, like that's kind of how you finish.
Usain Bolt, guys like that are, who was it? Was it Donovan Bailey, the dude that raced Michael Johnson at one time? I remember watching that race. So. But those guys were super long dudes, just those long strides and all that. But yeah, you're correct. Most great sprinters tend to be on the longer side, even if they're not necessarily tall, they're long. And with Chris Tyree, but those shorter sprints, those are more geared towards those. Because the long-legged guys, those are the guys that finish, right? Like they finish better. But yeah, I think Chris Tyree's gonna have some sick numbers. I'm also very curious to see what Braden Lindsey's time is gonna be, because I don't know if Braden Lindsey's like I think Braden Lindsey's fast, but I think he's more like fast from step one, as opposed to a 4.35 guy. I think he's gonna be at like a low 4.4 guy, but I'm curious, like with training, if he's healthy, does he kind of crack that high 4.3 number? Because I would have assumed Troy Pride was going to be in the 4.3s.
Yeah, and he ran at the pro day. Well, obviously because the combine, they didn't have a combine. Well, actually, no,
he did. Right? He ran a 4.4 flat.
4.4 flat. Got it. Yeah, remember that.
Yeah, which is kind of, it says a lot about you when people are disappointed that you ran a 4.4 flat. You know what I mean? It's like. Troy Pride didn't have a great combine. He ran a 4.4 flat. Well, what? What are you expecting to be in the 4.3s? Okay, that's still really flipping fast. You know what I mean? So but he's in that top group of. Look, because there haven't been a whole lot of Notre Dame guys in that 4.3 range. So him being a 4.4 flat certainly puts him in that conversation. So I'm really curious to see if to your point, if Kyle Hamilton can crack that number, that would be very interesting. Very interesting to see that. All right, facilitate and form. The tempo starts off, and then after a couple seconds, the tempo drops slower. I don't know why that is in there as a question. Domer Grizz, did any sources ever say why Rocco never played last year? Was he not physically ready, not working hard enough, doghouse, BK being unwilling to admit they misevaluated Madden, something else? I never heard, honestly. And when I'm going to be honest with you all about something. When the staff turned over, I just stopped really caring to spend all my time trying to find out why certain things didn't happen with people who were not here anymore. And, I just kind of didn't care why Jeff Quinn chose not to play him at that point in time, because it was in the past. Who's going to tell me otherwise? They're all gone. But, I haven't heard anything about him being in the doghouse. I haven't heard anything about him not working hard. I think it just came down to, not what, came Madden. But why not play him a left guard? So there's clearly was something, but I haven't heard anything about that would lead me to believe, Ryan, that there was like an issue, like they didn't like him or he got in trouble, because they had him with the first team offensive line almost the entire spring, which made him not playing in the fall even more silly. But he's another guy that I'm really curious to see kind of what he does this spring.
Yeah, if he takes a next step forward, and there's a little bit of a battle inside between him, Lugg, and Kristofic. I'm always a fan of competition, so I expect Rocco to take a big step forward. Absolutely.
Tony the Great, who do you think wins the starting big end position? I think the biggest thing is, Tony, we don't know who's going to play the big end position yet. Right. I'll say this: if it's just the guys that played it last year, I won't be shocked if Alexander Ahrensberger passes up Nana. If they don't move somebody else to big end, I won't be shocked by that at all.
Yeah. Well, the two names are, if Riley Mills does make the move, right? Like that's obviously a guy that you would think has a good opportunity. But I'm with you on Ahrensberger. I feel like he's been really productive, Brian. I know obviously coming from Germany, he was a guy that was going to be, a little bit of a longer project to get up to speed. But every time he's gotten opportunities, man, I feel like he's had some production and he's had the flashes, right? And obviously he has that length and you can't teach that. So, I'm sign me up on Alexander Ahrensberger taking on a big role this year.
Yeah. I think two guys to look for as possible moves out to big end would be Justin Adamiola and Riley Mills. if one of them moves out, they're moving them with the intention of them starting, or potentially both of them move, and it's them being the 1-2 punch. I personally would like to see Riley Mills move out there and be the guy with Ahrensberger and then Justin Adamiola being sort of a play him everywhere. Play him at big end sometimes, play him at Viper sometimes, put him in the pass rushing role. I would not lock Justin Adamiola into one spot. I wouldn't. I'd move him all around and just let him be that third end, so to speak, and play him just wherever you can get him reps. And, I would also love to see Alexander Ahrensberger really push his way into a third down role. Because I think putting an athletic 6'7" kid with long arms right up the middle of the defense on a pass rush would be fun to see. John A1, I'm going to throw this one to you, Ryan. If Cam Hart continues to improve as he gains experience, how does that impact the corner? Does he move back to boundary? Can the cornerback become a top performing unit? I'm going to let you start off with that one.
Okay. So continues to improve as he gains experience. How does that impact at corner? I mean,
just like, because I think moving him and, who plays where, that kind of thing.
I mean, in the perfect world, I would like some interchangeableness to it. Like, I don't think that you have to necessarily force a guy to just being a field or boundary. But I think that what would be nice is if you had a guy that took that next step forward, whether that is a Ryan Barnes or whether that is a Philip Riley or whatever. And I would actually like to see maybe Cam play a little bit more to the fields, to be honest, because I think that he's a guy that can make a lot more plays in like kind of working in that space. But you obviously don't have a player right now, in my opinion, that you're super comfortable with playing in those one-on-one situations into the boundary a ton.
And that's what hurt them last year when they did move Cam to the field, Ryan, is because teams just started doing their one-on-ones with it, because that puts Clarence Lewis against the team's best players. So Cincinnati said, we'll take that Alex Pierce versus Clarence Lewis matchup all day. Oklahoma said, we'll take that all day. So you're absolutely right. It's yes, I see where you're coming from, and the best position for Cam Hart is the field because he's so rangy. Right? I think he can play boundary at the high level, but I think to your point, that range to the field is impactful. But you've got to have somebody that can take those one-on-ones. Ryan, are you someone who think? Because I do. I personally like if the cornerback room was the way that I want it to be. They don't have boundary and field corners. They have left and right.
Just left, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's how I prefer it. But I just don't think that they're in a position where they can do that just yet.
Not yet. But I think that with what the ideology to recruiting is going to be, like, you would like for that to be the case. Because, I mean, even when Coach Freeman was at Cincinnati, as good as Ahmad Gardner was, I mean, obviously they had Kobe Bryant, who's a good football player as well, but Ahmad Gardner played to the boundary the majority of reps, right? Like, they weren't throwing him to the field much. I think in a perfect world, though, you have guys that can do both, because then you don't have to worry too much about dictating matchups as much, because they can create their own matchups. Like, they can be matchup negators rather than you having to suffice and, address the matchup. You just negate it as soon as kind of how you line up. So I think in a perfect world, we're playing left, right, because the guys just had a little bit of interchangeableness, but unfortunately just Notre Dame isn't there yet. But I hope that someone takes a step forward in that cornerback room and shows that he can, because I mean, if Philip Riley, for instance, could be the guy, I mean, he's physical enough to play into the boundary in the run game. Like, there's no doubt about it. Just the question is, can he hold up in one-on-one into the boundary and pass coverage? Like, that's obviously a huge question mark right now.
Right. And that's kind of partly also why I'm really hoping that I'm right about Brian Barnes. Because if you give me a cornerback room where Cam Hart might be your shortest guy, I think that, to your point, I think because the reason I'm saying is Ryan and Cam, to me, have very similar skill sets. Rangy, long, thin, can run, good top end speed. I think we're talking about the combine too, Ryan. I'm going to jump here real quick. That's a guy that I am incredibly intrigued by in next year's combine, Cam Hart, because I've been told by some people close to the program that Cam Hart's actually one of the team's fastest players, which surprised me. I've heard that from multiple people. Well, Notre Dame they do 40-yard dashes. Mm-hmm. So this isn't just them thinking, well, we watched the film. And no, this is the GPS. This is the 40-yard dashes. And I'm curious if you've heard that from some of this NFL scouts you've talked about, but I have heard from several people at Notre Dame that when they talk about the 4, and I think one of the players actually said this in an interview one time, when I've talked to people about who are the fastest players in Notre Dame, Cam Hart's name gets brought up every single time, which actually kind of surprised me. I mean, everybody knows that Irish Breakdown, we love Cam Hart, but it's not because I thought he was a blazer. It was the other traits that I thought were unique.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything about that?
Not a ton, because obviously, trying to get a little bit of feedback, and he obviously did not enter the draft, so you don't get as much extensive, because I don't think, for the most part, scouts, I don't think, did a ton of work on Cam because they didn't expect him necessarily to enter the draft, right? And that's kind of the little bit of the situation there. But I know we've talked in the past, like I have always thought, and I continue to think, that Cam Hart's a 4.4 something athlete at his 6'2.5", which if that's true, and he has a season that we think that he can for Notre Dame next year, I mean, he's going to get drafted high because teams are going to go crazy for that length and athleticism, like absolutely crazy for it.
Because I kind of viewed him, if I were to guess, in the Kevin Austin range of what you predicted, 4.48 to 4.52. That's kind of how I saw it. Which is moving pretty good for a. It's like what you said about Kyle Hamilton. Yeah. Kyle Hamilton goes out and runs a 4.5 flat at 6'4", 220. That's moving, right? Mm-hmm. But if Cam is what people say he is, then because again, if he's one of the 4 or 5 fastest players, and we just saw 2 of those 5 fastest players range between a 4.42 or 4.43, and then if Kyle Hamilton does run that fast, that's saying something, right? Sure. So next year's combine, from a speed standpoint, could be really interesting for Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. And again, and kind of because we've seen a guy, it was Fuller, Miles, Chase. We've never seen Notre Dame blow up a combine with speed. Now, I thought the 2019 combine was big for Notre Dame because you had multiple guys just have great performances. If you remember, Drew Tranquill had a great combine that year with his testing numbers. Boykin had
4.5 something. Yeah,
right.
It was crazy.
There were several guys from, I think, who was Troy Pride? No, he was in the 2020. I'm trying to think. There was a couple other guys that had really good. Jerry Tillery had some really good testing numbers. I believe he was one of the guys that there were several guys that had really good combine performances.
Jerry ran like 4.9 something in his size.
And he had some good movement drills. There was like several guys that really had good combines that year. And I'm trying to remember who the other ones were. But they've never had it where like multiple guys were fast, right? Like meaning skill players. Because Drew Tranquill ran in the 4.5s, which for a linebacker is pretty good.
Flying, yeah.
But you've got, let's just say potentially Chris Tyree, Cam Hart potentially, Braden Lindsey potentially, Avery Davis potentially, assuming he's healthy. Michael Mayer, I think, is going to do some really impressive things at the combine. Maybe not from a 40-yard dash standpoint, but from some other areas. There's a chance that you could see have Notre Dame have a lot of skill guys in next year's combine. I almost kind of hope that they do, because if Chris Tyree and Brandon Joseph and Cam Hart and all those guys are going pro, it means Notre Dame was really good this year. You know what I mean? So it's going to be very, very interesting. Here's one for you. Well, let's look at this from a draft. I'm not projecting to the draft, but put your draft analyst hat on and break down the game of Clarence Lewis. What is the scouting report on Clarence Lewis? In other words, if you were an OC, how would you attack him, and what can you do to avoid trying when he's out there, because he can take it away? I want you to look at it from a NFL scouting combine. Then I'm going to look at it from an OC standpoint of how I would attack him.
Okay. So I would say for Clarence, in an ideal world, he is a zone-based outside corner, cover 2 heavy scheme potentially, that it was able for him to play a little bit off and then react and come up a little bit off, man. But for the most part, I'm going to play a heavy dose of zone. He's got a pretty nice build. He's not the longest guy in the world, but he is a compact, physical-looking dude that I think can also play a little bit inside at nickel and maybe eventually be a safety convert down the road. But I think that he brings enough functional quickness to make some plays in off coverage. I think he displays good zone awareness to make plays in that regard as well. But I don't think that he is the twitchiest, longest player where he's going to play a ton of man coverage at a successful level. So I just see more of a little bit of a system-specific type of player. I don't think that he's a diverse player, but I think in the right system, he can be successful for what he does well.
For me, I think that's why he's in a perfect world. He's a safety. Because to your point about the best system for him at corner is where everything stays in front of him. Cover two, everything stays in front of you. As an offensive coordinator, I'm saying every time I got number 6 on an island, I'm going at him with something that forces him to flip his hips and run, whether it be vertical routes, whether it be go routes, comebacks, kind of invert corners, like the stack corner, you kind of break in and get him chasing. If I think they're in man, I'm going to get him chasing me across field on slant, on crossers and on digs and drags. Where I think Clarence is good is on the quick stuff. Like, hey, I'm going to drive on a slant. I'm going to drive on an out cut. I'm going to drive on a stick route. Those kind of things I think he can do. Where when he's got to flip his hips and run or turn direction and run is when he gets in trouble. And I don't think he plays the ball real well down the field either. So as an offensive coordinator, to Ryan's point about the lack of twitchiness, he doesn't transition really well. I just think he's a little tight-hipped. As a safety, I think you could play to his skill set really effectively. As a corner, I'm making him chase and run all day because I don't think he can. I don't think he has the skill set to do that. And that's why I feel like eventually safety should be the position where I think he's most comfortable. You can't move him until other guys prove – somebody's going to have to make you move Clarence Lewis to safety. I mean, just otherwise you can't justify taking a guy that started as many games he started and moving him to another position until someone has given you a reason to do so. Because you think someone else can be good. You got to see it. You got to see it. All right, here's a two-part. This is interesting, Ryan. From Ben L. He says, Brian, with the combine here this weekend, what are your thoughts on grading players with stars? Part 2 is I feel the star system is too subjective and makes it harder to determine what type of player you are recruiting. Do you have thoughts on what a star system could be replaced with? Let me give my quick thoughts real quick, Brian. I want to hear from you. I don't have a problem with the star ranking. Here's my issue with it. I use star rankings. My issue with it is I feel like, yes, it is subjective, but every single way of measuring and evaluating and grading players is going to be subjective. Right? Like you can get these analytics people that are going to give me GPS times and all this other kind of stuff, but there's still a lot that goes into whether or not you can play. Right? And that's the key for me. To me, the problem I have with the national star rankings is I just don't feel anymore that they care as much about being right. I think there's more to it now than it just evaluate. Like when Rivals got started, it was a lot of former coaches and guys that had been in scouting departments that like really took pride in, I want to get this right. And that's where a lot of the average and the percentages came from was that era. And I won't be surprised to see more misses down the road when it comes to it, because I just feel like there's less objectivity to it. There's more, hey, I mean, I know for a fact that there's an outlet out there that has told kids, if you talk to us, only we'll bump your ranking up. That's a fact. That's not a guess. That's a fact. Unless several kids over several years were just flat liars, which I don't believe. That's true. We know ESPN adjusts their rankings based on who plays and doesn't play in their All-Star game. So I think that's my issue. I don't have a problem with the star ranking because you got to have something. You can, whether it's stars or grade or whatever the case may be. I think for me, I like the way that I do it. So I do it that way, which is I give every player a grade. That grade determines what your star ranking is. There's a range. I also like the fact that I think the best way for me to look at it, because I'm looking at it from a coaching standpoint, is to take into account a current grade. This is where this kid is now, but then to evaluate the upside grade. Because some guys may be a better player now. Like right now, Jaden Greathouse is a better player than Braylon James, and I don't think it's close right now. Sure. In 3 years, I fully anticipate Braylon James being a better player than Jaden Greathouse, right? And that's something you got to look at. So do you take the floor? Do you take the ceiling? To me, I kind of have both. I have the grade of what a guy is now, which is going to reflect kind of his readiness to play. And then I have the upside grade of if this guy taps into it, he can be this. And the perfect example of that is Joe Alt. And if I remember correctly, I'm actually going to pull this up because I want to be accurate on this. But I think I had Joe Alt as a 3-star. So I have 5-star, 4.5-star, 4-star, 3.5-star, and then 3-star is how I have it. Because I feel like a 4-star can be the number 33 player in the country, and a 4-star can also be a guy that's not in the top 250. How do you separate that, right? So instead of giving them like he's a 6.0 4-star, a 5.9 4-star, a 5.8 4-star. I just, to me, it just add a different level of the star ranking in there, right? But when I looked at Joe Alt last year, I saw a kid that I just didn't think was like a great player at the time, but a guy that I thought had a lot of talent. So I gave him a 3-star grade for what he was as a high school player. His upside grade was 4.5 star. Well, a 4.5 star grade is a top 50 national player. So like you see the upside. Now, where I was wrong is he was ready much sooner than I thought he was going to be ready. Am I shocked that Joe Alt is the player that he's become? No. I'm shocked he did it as a freshman. I thought that'd be what he would be as like a third-year guy. But I think that's why the upside grade to me is kind of gives me an ability to say, hey, here's what a guy is now, and here's what he's going to be, and it kind of helps you, differentiate between the ceiling and the floor, as opposed to turning them into one. So, Ryan, in your opinion, what are your thoughts on the star ranking, and is there something that you think that we could replace it with?
I mean, first and foremost, Ben, I think it's a great question. I am fine with the star ranking as well. And I obviously come from, again, an NFL draft background where we work off of usually a 9-point scale, right? So we're working on, 0 through 9 number wise, and you give each of these, and it goes obviously a little bit deeper because you are grading every single attributes in your evaluation, and then you're refining your final grade based upon what you think that player is upside wise. And I think that scouting is subjective. Is fully subjective, honestly, whether you are grading a college player coming out or whether you're grading a high school player. Now, high school players are harder because you are projecting a lot more maturation, right? From 17, 18 years old to 22. Like that is a big leap to a guy that is 22, 23 to 26, 27. Like that is a much different type of thing. So high school scouting, I think, is a lot harder, honestly, than projecting college players to the NFL. Now, it's subjective, and I think that sometimes no matter what scouting you're doing, numbers can muddle your opinion a little bit because you get so worked up with the GPS tracking that you were talking about, with the combine numbers, with those things that it creates biases in your mind. But at the very heart of it, it is what your eyes see on film. So no matter what the rating is, it just has to be true to what you see on film. And so I don't have any issue if it's a ranking. I don't have any issue if it's a numbers ranking. As long as it's coherent, it makes sense, and it's consistent, right. I'm good with it. And I think especially in your scale, Brian, where you are grading the player they are now and the projection of that player, I think that works well together because some players are further along. No players from the same situations. There's a lot more differences of level of school, level of competition, competition within states, all that good stuff than there is in just a college football atmosphere. So I like that type of subjectivity, but I also like that there's multiple scales, right? Like I think that it needs multiple scales because there's such a big jump that a player could have during his career.
Right. And that's why, like, to me, I'm not, if I'm an NFL scout, I don't have an upside grade. I'm not drafting you for what you can be 5 years from now. I mean, maybe in the 6th round, you know what I mean? Like for some late round sleepers, but like if I'm picking a guy in the first 3 rounds, I need to know that you can play for us now. Because if I keep taking a bunch of, low floor, high ceiling 3rd round picks, then I'm going to be picking for someone else in a couple of years because I'm going to be out of a job. You know what I mean? Like you've got to, it's a completely different mindset, right? Whereas in college, you have red shirts, and there's not the financial investment, right? Like if I'm paying a guy in the 1st round, he needs to play because I can't afford to, barring a unique quarterback situation like a Trey Lance or something like that. Like you're drafting a guy to help you, not hopefully in 3 years, this guy that I'm paying $7 million a year is going to be able to help us, right? Where in college, it's fine. It doesn't cost you anything to bring in a guy like Joe Alt and sit him for a couple years. And then occasionally a guy like that's going to surprise you and be ready faster than you think, right? So it's a completely different skill. And I think the thing that you talked about too is there's so much more physical maturation from a kid going from a senior in high school to college than a senior in college to the NFL. And that's the other part of this too, is like there needs to be more of a projection from high school recruiting to college because you have to be able to look at that. Like, hey, it's like you need to be able to look at a Monroe Freeling and say, he's 280 now, or maybe he's down to 270, 265 now. But when this kid stops playing basketball, he's going to do this, right? And the other side of the coin is you need to be able to look at some of these 5-star guys that are dominant high school players and say, that's as good as this guy's going to be. Like, he's already this, and this. You know, I've met this kid. He looked like a grown man in the 8th grade. Kind of still looks like he did in the 8th grade. You know, those kind of guys they've kind of reached their peak. They're going to get passed up by those other guys.
It's like Dylan Moses, right? Like, he was just that guy for so long. And then you're like Alabama. It's like he's been 6'3", 230 for like 6 years now.
Right.
Like, that's all he is at this point.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that because he's still a good player. I mean, obviously the injury took away from it a little bit, but it's like players develop at completely different rates. Like, it's hard to project, especially at that age.
Right. It's a good one. I like, Ben, that's a really good question. And to your system, like there's the 8-point scale, like you got to grade all of it. That's why I changed my recruiting system the way that I did, because it is subjective. I was missing on guys early on consistently certain types of players, mainly big receivers, because I could look at Micah Jones and see, like, of all the things I could do with him as a coordinator with the size and this, and I would be more because I like big receivers, right? Like, as that boundary position. I don't like only big receivers. I like him for that role. And so I gave him a higher grade than I should have and than I would have with the new system, because my bias towards that skill set caused me to, well, it's okay that he doesn't have this because he's got that. And so what my grading system has done now, because again, part of being a good evaluator is recognize that you do have a bias. Everybody has biases. You know, everybody has certain, and it's a bias you're not aware of, right? And when you do become aware of it, you don't stop liking things you like. You just try to put safeguards in place to make sure you're not putting too much value on that. And so, you know, the way I came up with the grading system now is there's 8 different categories. There's some for size and strength. There's some for athleticism and speed. There's some for technical skill. There's an intangible grade that takes a look at production, injury history, things like that, you know, how do you factor that in? Well, now there's a grade for that. And I think those are the type of things that you talk about, like when you're NFL scout, is you've got to look at all these different types of skill categories and come to a consensus on who this kid is. And can we live with maybe these couple things where he wasn't graded high enough? Can we live with that because we think he's so good in these other areas that he can help us?
And I think understanding your bias is very important, because that's where your misses come from. And like your miss with Micah Jones, quote unquote, I'm sure you would have evolved as an evaluator in that sense. My thing was, for the longest time, I fell in love with nuanced pass rushers on the edge, and I didn't think as much about the athletic profile as a ton. So like, I fell in love with Derek Barnett coming out of Tennessee because he was just so advanced and he had such strong hands, and that's all well and good, but like the kid's wasn't very flexible and the kid didn't change direction a ton. And Curtis Weaver from Boise State was another guy that got me a little bit a couple years ago. So I've really kind of placed an emphasis on athletic traits at that position, at defensive end, at edge. And that's just where the evolution, I think, comes from, because of the guys that you miss on. And I think it's, as long as you learn from it and you move forward, you're a better person for it and you're a better evaluator for it.
And you also have to understand what are the most important traits at each position. That's the other thing. It's like, there are certain things you can be good at this if you don't have this, but you can't be good over here if you don't have that. You can be a receiver with tight hips and be great. You can't really be a corner in today's game and be great with tight hips. Or at least it's rare. You have to be a scheme fit, you know, that kind of thing. Like, Richard Sherman was a great player. There are defenses he could have played in that he would not have been a great player. That's my opinion. Whereas a guy like Deion Sanders, a guy like Darrell Revis, those guys tend to be Champ Bailey. They can kind of be good in anything. You know what I mean? And so that you got to look at those things and how does that impact us? And I think that's another thing is you see teams, you don't see enough of this. Like, a grade should be impacted by where a kid is going to school. It should be to a degree. And that's partly what I've come up with, that intangibles grade. So like, if, you know, take Cade Klubnik, for example, my favorite quarterback in last year's class, I would not be fired up if he was Wisconsin's quarterback and they were going to run the same system they've been running, because he doesn't fit that system. Putting him under center, play action passes, like, you've taken away all the things that make him great, in my opinion. But you send him to Clemson, and it's like, that's the perfect offense for him. Quick throws, RPOs, getting the ball out, taking some shots downfield. You know what I mean? So like, that's the other thing that has to be considered. And when you're in the NFL draft, you may value a guy more than another team because we run a system that guy is perfect for us, where that other team say he doesn't fit your system. And that's the other thing that I don't think there's enough of that when it comes to ranking high school kids, which I kind of understand. It's hard for them. It's hard to do that, and have that impact a ranking. So I don't necessarily fault them for that, but it's something that I look at when I'm putting rankings together. Like, that kid's going to the system. I think that was a bad decision. He does not fit that system. I'm going to ding that guy a little bit, right? If it comes down to it. And so I think that's another fun aspect of evaluating as well. So
Absolutely.
Let's try to rock and roll through some of these last questions, Ryan, because we're going to have to get running here soon. Here's an interesting one. David M says, if Marcus Freeman struggles as a new coach at Notre Dame and only wins 6, 7, 8 games, how does that impact Notre Dame recruiting? I'll let you start off with that one, Ryan.
I mean, it impacts it a little bit. I think it stalls momentum to a degree because there are some recruits that obviously want to see results on the field, right? So I think that right now, Marcus Freeman and the staff has really taken a lot of momentum. And I mean, there's obviously quantitative proof of that, right? Like, they had number 1 class in the 2023 class. So they're obviously moving in the right direction, but they need to continue that momentum onto the field. So it can stall momentum. I don't think it completely derails momentum or destroys momentum if they have a first-year miscues on the field, but I think that it can definitely stall it a little bit. So you definitely need to have some results on the field, I think, to really continue that momentum, but I don't think it completely destroys it if they doesn't have the greatest first season.
And also, I'd say it depends on – that's a pretty important range there. 6 and 7 looks a whole lot different than 8 and 5. You may only say, well, it's only 2 games. No, trust me, it matters. Losing record versus winning record would hurt big. Nothing is going to destroy their recruiting in 1 year, but they will lose players this year if they go 6 and 7, 7 and 6, or even 8 and 5. They'll lose some kids. So that would hurt. But again, to Ryan's point, they don't lose all of them. I mean, look, some of the most impactful players Notre Dame has signed during this stretch of 5-year great runs were kids assigned right after the 4 and 8 season. Think about it. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Robert Hainsey, Aaron Banks, right? I mean, those are 3 pretty big ones, right? I mean, they were all part of that 2017 class. Those are pretty good football players, right? And so they'll still get guys, right? And they're not going to lose everybody, but they'll lose a couple guys. It'll like, if they go 6 and 7, for me it'd be really hard to keep a Keon Keeley, a Peyton Bowen, guys like that, because those guys want to win championships. And if you're out there going 6 and 7, 7 and 6, 8 and 5, that's like, man, you're a lot further away than I thought. Some other guys from the 2017 class: Cole Kmet, Brock Wright, Avery Davis, Josh Lugg, Drew White, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Kurt Heinisch, Myron Tungavaloa-Amosa. So some really important guys to Notre Dame's recent run were signed after that bad year, right? Mm-hmm. So it would hurt it. And Ryan used the word stall it. I think that's a good way of putting it. But it would sting. It would sting. Now, the good news is I don't think there's a chance in heck that Notre Dame is 8 and 5 or worse. I think the floor to me is 9 and 4 would be that was a rough year. Like, that would be the floor for me, in my opinion. And that would be a disappointing year. It would. A couple other here. Brandon Plesner, any updates on whether Xavier Watts may move to receiver, seeing your depth chart projection for the spring? Wide receiver depth sure looks bleak and gives me anxiety. Need a playmaker like Watts on offense. Everybody knows that I want Xavier Watts on offense, but I also don't think that the receiving core is bleak without him. I want him on offense because I think he can be really good at receiver, not because I think they have a need there. Because you don't move a kid like him at his age because there's a need. You move him because you think he can be a guy. I think he can be a guy. But as Ryan and I discussed earlier, we also think Lorenzo Styles can be a guy. We think that Deion Colsey could be a guy. Here's the reality. If you look at the depth chart and you've got Colsey, Styles, Lindsey, Jaden Thomas, and you've got Avery Davis and Joe Wilkins, we're not as concerned about the receiving core for the spring from a number standpoint. And you got Tobias Merriweather showing up, right? So you look at the numbers, say, man, that's stinking Dell, losing all these transfers and all that. But you're not like, oh my gosh, they're in trouble. I think that you don't make the mistake of moving a guy like Watts because you're concerned about your spring depth chart. If you're concerned about your fall depth chart, then you may have that conversation. But your spring depth chart, you don't do it. You don't do it because of that. You do that because you think he can help you. I don't think they're going to move him. I don't think he wants to move. I think that bridge has kind of been burned, even with new coaches there. I just think it's kind of like, hey, I know these guys value me. The last group didn't value me, and I'm not going to take that chance because I'm a junior now. And so I think that's kind of where he is. And then Brandon also says, is it a done deal with Riley Mills moving to strong side? And I don't, not that I know of, I don't know if it's a done deal. That the strong side end stuff that we reported was going to happen, that was before Mike Elston left when I reported that, because that's what Mike Elston was going to do. If Mike Elston was still here, it'd be a done deal. I don't know if it's the case with Al Wall. I mean, there's a new D coordinator and a new D line coach, so I can't tell you if that's a done deal. Here's another depth chart one. Zach Martin, looking at the depth charts, do you think Snead will take a large share of the Rover snaps by season's end? What do you think about that one, Ryan?
I think it's interesting because I think that you have seen some nice flashes from Jack Kaiser, but I don't think Jack Kaiser played at a level last year where he is foregone and untouchable at the position. So, I mean, if Jalen Snead can get up to speed in the game as quickly as you think that he possibly can, I think is very possible, because I just don't think that Jack Kaiser's done quite enough where it's just a foregone conclusion that he's the guy by season's end, right? Because there's a guy of the talent of Jalen Snead that's going to be nipping at his heels. And I think that if they're going to be a really good football team, Jalen Snead has to, force him to be uncomfortable a little bit. And I think that would only improve not only Kaiser's game, but also getting a dynamic player like Snead potentially on the field in some capacity, I think is a big time opportunity. So I think it's possible. Yeah, I think it's possible.
I would be disappointed, to Ryan's point. I'd be disappointed if Jalen Snead's not forcing his way into the field by the end of the year. Now, the large share of the Rover snaps, I'm not ready to go there yet. Let me see him in pads once. I also don't think he's the only freshman we need to be talking about at Rover. I think Nolan Ziegler is going to be – is a much better player than a lot of people realize. And I think he's going to be a factor in this thing too. So it wouldn't shock me if both him and Jalen Snead are playing there by the end of the year more. And, but again, I think this would be a much better question, Zach, to ask at the end of the spring. That's the thing, is like we're having to project a kid who's never played a snap of practice ball in college, right? You know what I mean? So how quickly does he pick up the defense, right? Can he add a little bit of girth? Can he, how's he doing in the weight room? Can he handle the academic piece? All those kind of things. They all factor into whether or not a kid's going to play. And we just haven't seen him be able to go through that yet. You have a super chat from Brandon Plesner. Hypothetically, if you could choose 3 Notre Dame players or commits to host Dante Moore on a Notre Dame official visit, who would it be and why? Time to seal the deal here, so choose wisely. 3 Notre Dame, 3 numbers or commits. So obviously he's talking about current players and commits, because my thoughts are going to, Joe Montana, Tony Rice, and Brady Quinn would be, you know what I mean? But 3 current players or commits to host Dante Moore.
I think one that popped in my head immediately was Blake Fisher. And I think it's because I think that Blake Fisher has kind of like a bubbly personality, right? Like he seems
really
like he's
good
just
kid.
Really good kid. Obviously represents everything you want, but I think like everything I've seen him, he just kind of has like a really nice, like innocence to him,
he's a charming
exactly.
kid. A really charming kid. He is.
And if everything works out, he may be protecting you, for a year or so. And I mean, potentially wise, like you're going to look at this guy and be like, that 6'6", 335-pound guy's blocking for the quarterbacks here. Like that's a dude right there. So immediately I went Blake Fisher would be a guy for me, just kind of when you kind of put together offensive tackle, importance to a quarterback, and also I think that he has the personality that would come across really well. So that would be a guy for me immediately, I would think. After that, it's a little tougher after that.
So I have, while you're thinking, I have some thoughts on that. For me, I'm not really into the whole commits hosting him, because I kind of want them around, but obviously, and right now there's not really a lot of offensive commits that are going to move the needle. Cooper Flanagan and Cedric Urban aren't moving the needle. Blake Fisher's one, Michael Mayer's the other.
Oh, Mayer's a good one. I always forget about Mayer somehow.
Yeah,
man.
like he's coming back. Yeah, the other one would be Deion Colsey, and let me explain why. number one, Dante's about 6'1.5", 6'2". I want him walking in the room and being like this. All right. I want him looking up at these guys, right? There's just something to that, like, hey, man, we got your back. You know what I mean? The other thing is, I think Dion and Dante strike me as similar personality-wise. Dion is a really intelligent, thoughtful kid, like just like thinking about the future and using his name, image, and likeness. There's things he's done sort of, it's not getting talked about because he's not a name, he's not a big time player, but like things where he's like thinking about like, okay, how can I use my fame to help others kind of thing? You know what I mean? Like he strikes me as that kind of guy. And I think Dante strikes me as that kind of guy. So I think they have something in common there. And Dion can say, hey, look, like I am also going to be catching passes from you. You got these 2 6'5" giants that you're throwing to, and this 6'6", 335-pound monster going to block for you. But I also think there's 3 completely different personalities, where Blake is the outgoing, really fun, energetic, great, charming kid. Mayer's the side, sort of like the cerebral, like kind of quiet, blunt, matter of fact, like, yeah, dude, we're going to beast. And then Dion's the intellectual kid that's a lot like Dante. So you've got 3 very different personality types that are huge, physically huge. And I think for a 6'1.5", 200-pound quarterback, it's like, hey, I'm got these monsters around me. And then number 3, I think there's really good players there. One's blocking for you, and now Mayer's not going to catch passes from him, right? But Mayer, I think, can be the, hey man, let me tell you about some of the deals I've gotten at Notre Dame as a tight end. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I just signed a $40,000 signing bonus on a deal, right? And then Dion, obviously, I think they would click. They would have a lot in common. You could throw Lorenzo Styles in there. Another guy that I would consider, so like I would not have him host this guy, but I would definitely make sure that there are times when I've got Dante sitting around with Tyler and Drew.
Sure.
Because I think they would all get along really well, and those kids love Notre Dame. They would like welcome Dante. I don't think there'd be like kind of how Drew was with Tyler. I mean, like I think that would also be important too. It's like, hey man, you're not going to come here. Yes, we're going to battle you. I mean, if I'm Tyler, and hey, look, man, we're not going to hand you the job. You got to battle us, man. But look, we get along really well. I want him to see that Tyler Drew dynamic. These are two highly ranked guys, and they compete, but it's not like this, screw you, I'm going to hate you. Like that can make life miserable when like the dudes at your position, like I want competition. I don't want you just handing your job over, but I don't want you hating on each other. I don't want I don't want the drama, right? I hate drama. And I think that would be good for him to see too. Like these guys get along really well, even though they're battling. I mean, they're competing their butts off against each other every day, but they get along, and they have each other's back. Hey man, I want the job, but if he gets it, I'm going to do whatever I can to help him out. I think that kind of thing can really be an influencer on that as well. Did you think of any others?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, dude, I feel like Michael Mayer has just been on campus for so long, even though he's only going to his junior year. I always forget about him, man. I'm just like, how can you forget about the best tight end in college football? But yeah, Mayer would definitely be one. Maybe I would throw, and it's a little bit of a different, I guess, perspective, but like we already have one big hulking guy in a Blake Fisher. Let's throw in Joe Alt too. These are the bodyguards walking you around, and then you got Michael Mayer as well. And I feel like Joe and Michael probably have a little bit more of a similar personality, but at least you got the bubbliness, the charm from Blake Fisher on that side. And then you can see that again, I agree with your premise there, because like I want him walking in and just being like, whoa, these dudes play at Notre Dame. Like that's nuts.
And 2 of them are pass catchers.
Right. Yeah. I even thought about like, do we want to get one defensive guy in there? Like maybe we'll get Isaiah Foskey and just like, whoa, dude, that guy's hunting quarterbacks for my team too. That's nuts. I don't want to play against that. Like, no, thank you. So a couple guys came to mind.
Yeah. I love it. All right. A few more here. Okay. And we've got, and Brandon, thank you also obviously for the super chat.
Yep.
Nicholas Grosh, Ryan, this is a good one for you. After Dante Moore, who is the best 2023 recruit out there that could make I guess I have to kind of find that question because I'm not quite sure what the second part of that question was. It looks like maybe there was a second part of the question. I'd say, let's just say biggest – here we go. Biggest impact in college football next year. Now, that would be next year, meaning when they arrive in 2023.
So 2023. Okay, so let's think. biggest impacts, positions that are going to need it. I'm going to say cornerback, right? Like, I think there's a cornerback that could potentially make a big impact. Well, actually, no. Stop. Sorry. Wait, does that say the next commit, Brian, or somebody that's already committed to counts?
Let's do two, because I know where you're going with this. Let's give an uncommitted kid, and then we can say Keon Keeley.
Yes. Then we can say Keon Keeley. Keon Keeley was the guy, man.
Right.
It's like it's like the perfect trajectory, right? Because it's like Isaiah Foskey's out, and then here comes Keon Keeley on campus, right? Like that's just kind of where my mind went. Next commit, I'm going to say whoever the next cornerback is, was where I was going, because in theory, Cam Hart might be gone after this year. I know he'll probably still have like another year of eligibility, but if everything goes well and he has the season we think he could, I imagine he'll test NFL waters, and we'll see what the other cornerbacks kind of do, but it's still a question mark moving forward as of now, and there's going to be at least one starting position that's up for grabs in theory. So I don't know who that cornerback is going to be, obviously, but there's guys like Micah Tease on the board, Malik Muhammad on the board, Braxton Myers on the board. So there's some talented cornerbacks that are on the board for 2023. So let's say one of them has the opportunity to compete for a cornerback job that's open potentially.
It's a good one. I think that Malik Muhammad could be that kind of guy. Obviously, for me, uncommitted player, I think that could have the biggest impact for me, obviously after Dante. It's a tough one because uncommitted player, the guy that could come in and have the biggest impact for Notre Dame is Caleb Downs. I mean, I think he comes in and starts day one. I mean, I think he's a big time player. Offensively, I'd probably go. Well, that's a tough one too, because I said, Cornell Tate. Well, it's not a given that Cornell Tate's going to show up at Notre Dame and start. Right away.
Because they're going to be juniors at that point, right?
You're going to have Colsey and Styles and Tobias Merriweather, and you know what I mean? It's like, so, I think I'd probably have to go with a DB. I think either like a Malik Muhammad kind of guy or a Caleb Downs, to me, would be the guys but the biggest thing for me is if they can get Dante Moore and Keon Keeley in the same class, a kid that's already in the class, I mean, to me, that's huge. Because you have two potential guys that can show up day one and be an impact. Now, I don't think Dante Moore's going to start as a true freshman, because I think Tyler Buckner's going to be starting quarterback. But if Tyler doesn't get better, or if Tyler gets hurt, I believe Dante's the kind of kid that as a true freshman can do some things. But then as you look as his sophomore year is when you to me, I've said, look, I think he's a Bryce Young kind of player. And honestly, I like his skills more than I like Bryce Young's. I just do. But Bryce isn't a great player just because of his physical tools. Bryce is a great player because that kid is really smart and advanced and savvy. But I think Dante has some of that stuff too, as well. So that's that would be mine. Joseph Sergey, what is the info on Vizina pushing back his visit? So I believe, Ryan, you had that first. You had that before he even came out, because he tweeted about it shortly after you put it on the message board. Yeah. So another reason why you all need to be on the Notre Dame message or the Irish Breakdown message board, because you're going to get this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so basically the biggest piece of info is that he was supposed to visit this past weekend, which was
it's upcoming.
Upcoming weekend. So the trip got not switched. The trip got canceled to Notre Dame. He will be in Ole Miss instead this weekend. He is still planning on visiting a little later down the line, but the staff asked him to push the
Notre Dame
trip.
staff.
Notre Dame staff asked him to push the trip back to later into the spring. So there are still plans for him to eventually come back to Notre Dame, but the Notre Dame staff did ask that would be pushed back right now.
And then the next question is going to be why. And I think it's because I think Notre Dame is doing what I have said. Ryan, I think we're on the same page here. I've said, look, you've got to be all in on Dante. And the thing I said then is you make it public. Say, well, how do you make it public? This is exactly how. Chris Vizina is going to visit, and some people start writing stories about it. And then all of a sudden, hey, man, we want to push you back, because right now our focus is on one guy. Right? Now, it's risky, but – and then I think there's another practicality to it, too, where if you did maybe Chris Vizina's last visit, not his first visit in this regard.
Absolutely.
But the main reason is this is a message to Dante Moore that says, you're our guy.
Right.
Right? We just pushed back a a guy that on 3 thinks is better than you, still nuts. And say, hey, you're our guy. And so I'm not used to this whole when we say something, they do what we say. Not that they're doing it because we said it, meaning that we're on the same page. They're thinking along the same lines they're thinking, right? That we're thinking. Right. So it's not like I said this and Thomas, oh, Driscoll said this. That's not what I'm saying. So just hear that. But when what we think is also what they do, I'm not used to that, right? I almost kind of felt like I actually said to my dad at one point in time last year, I need to start saying the opposite of what I believe because I feel like that's the only way Brian Kelly does the right thing. Is it because he's like he always does the exact opposite of what I say? You know what I mean? And so
that's funny.
Yeah,
that's so funny.
All right, let's get to this here. All right, a couple more here. Okay, we got to skip a few of them. Here's just a couple that I thought were great. We were talking about the game we want to go to. DE says 73 Notre Dame versus Alabama. I believe that was the Sugar Bowl. Aaron versus Bear Bryant. That's the game for me. That was Loose Emoji's favorite Notre Dame game. He literally 7 or 8 times would show me that YouTube video, and that was his favorite Notre Dame game. And then Chill said Notre Dame versus USC 88. Tony Rice versus Rodney Pete. That would have been a cool game too, also because you'd have been at the Coliseum, Chill, watching them beat the number 2 USC team. I mean, that was a really good USC team. Like, people forget that. Like, they were ranked number 2 in the country. If USC wins that game, they're playing for the national championship in the Rose Bowl. You know, so, like, that was, like, 2 rivals, and the winner is putting themselves in position to win a title. Like, that's big time. And not only did they win, they smacked them. I mean, first play of the game, Tony goes deep to Rocket. I mean, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Okay, let me get to a few more here that I think would. Oh, somebody was talking about the 7-on-7 game. Will Chasanik said Blue and Gold's got Mike Goolsby. They smacking y'all. So first of all, okay, Mike Goolsby doesn't work for them. He does some stuff for them. So if we're gonna take people that are just do some stuff for them, hey, I got Oscar McBride blocking Mike Goolsby. Okay, I got my man Big O blocking him. I've got Reggie Brooks has been on our show before. You know what I mean? So like. I mean, you want to go there. You know, we did a film breakdown. Malik
Alex
Zaire,
Bars,
you know
right?
what I mean?
Alex Bars
has been on there, right? So, I mean, if you want to go there, just people to kind of do some things from time to time. But yeah, I would not want to be in a 7-on-7 game across from Mike Goolsby, even if they can't tackle. I just feel like Mike is that kind of guy to just be like, I'm gonna hit him anyway. You know what I mean? So, like, yeah, you're right. I wouldn't want to do that. But that's why I got to get my boys, right? Like, I got to get Big O. Hey, Oscar, can you block this guy for me, man, please, buddy? And we get it done. So that's a great. Will, that was awesome, by the way. That was really funny. But no, we'd have something for him. And Mike's a good dude. I've had a chance to interact with him a couple times. He's a good guy. And I saw Ryan. I saw you started this one. What I like how you asked the question. What was my 40 time? Because what my 40 time is now is not good. The fastest I ever got timed was 4.59. So that was the fastest I was ever timed. Yeah. So, and that, again, I was like 170 pounds when I ran that. So I was smaller. So
yeah, I was a little slower. I was like, I think my best was somewhere in the 4.8s. I played linebacker at like 210, 215. So I wasn't very quick, but yeah.
Now, I also didn't train for the 40 either because I was a quarterback. So that was my freshman year when I had been playing receiver as a freshman. And I was actually finally training more for speed as opposed to quickness. So I don't know if I would have ran that in high school, but I did run that in college. Here's something for you, Ryan, that I like as these last couple questions come in. If you could add one new event to the NFL Combine, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, I think I would remove one first. Like, I would get rid of the bench press because that doesn't matter at all to me. So I would throw out the bench press, and maybe we'll get some power cleans up in there or something that's a little more translatable to the football field. So maybe I think I might replace something a little more than just add something, I think. Yeah, we'll go with that.
All right. Jim DeMatteis with a super chat. Jim, thank you so much for that. And we got last two. Number one is JP Buellsfeld. My man JP says, I want to invite the IB family to join my simple tailgate party on May 7th in the stadium parking lot before the Garth Brooks concert. So Garth is obviously playing again at Notre Dame Stadium, which is awesome. My wife and I are going to go to that as long as it's not as cold and rainy as it was the last time he played at Notre Dame Stadium. That was a miserable day. I was so glad I decided not to go that day. Won't make that mistake again this time because I want to go see him perform. I'm not a country music guy, but it's kind of like you may not like, rock, but if Michael Jackson's playing at Notre Dame Stadium, you're going to go watch, right? So I think that'll be fun. And my wife likes country music, so that's why we're going to go. And then here's the last one, Richard Robinson. I think this is a great way to end when you consider how we started the show. I think it's a great way to end. Bold prediction. If the Irish land Dante Moore, national championship within the 3 years, what do you guys think? His bold prediction is if they land Dante Moore, that Notre Dame will win a national championship within 3 years. What do you think?
Yes. I'm saying yes. I think it's going in the right direction. And if Notre Dame finishes off the 2023 class with Dante Moore and on top of what more they can pull in, I think especially – I even go as far as to say, like, Dante obviously is a big impact player potentially for them, but, like, just look at the 2023 players that are going to come back potentially with Tyler Buckner and with Blake Fisher and with Joe Alt and with Lorenzo Styles and with Deion Colsey. And I think that the trend is going in the right direction. I'm a fan of the coaching staff. I think that the coaching staff is putting this program in the right direction. So, yes, with Dante Moore moving forward, I think Notre Dame will win a national championship within 3 years. Yes.
I'm with you. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I think Notre Dame is on pace to win a championship in the next 3 to 4 years. So when I say next 3 to 4, I'm talking beginning this year. Because again, I don't think it's a given that Dante Moore is going to be the starting quarterback on the next national championship team. That would be my other thing. Meaning there's a dude on campus that if he's as good as I think he could be, gives him that shot as well. Will we do it or not? I don't know. I've never felt more confident about Notre Dame being in a position as an entire program to win a championship than I am right now. And I don't know if I'd feel that way if they didn't make the coaching change, just because I felt like at least now you feel like there's hope that they're going to not keep doing dumb things that kept them from doing it in the past, right? And as we've said, talent's not the problem. I'm excited to see what the coaching staff can do, but I think the talent that is this 2023 class has a chance to be real special. But as Ryan pointed out, the 2021 class, there's some straight dudes in that class. The defensive class in 2022 there are some dudes in that class. And so I really think the talent level, top to bottom, has a chance to be as good as anybody in the country, or at least good enough to where on a given Saturday or a given playoff game, they've got a chance to go win that game. And that's where I'm at. That's kind of how I feel about it. So if Clemson and Alabama in 2016 played each other 10 times, I think Alabama wins more games than Clemson. I do, but they just needed to win it once, and the one that counted. And that's just kind of how I feel. You don't always have to be the best team. You just have to be the best team that day. In 2008, I felt like if Oklahoma and Florida would have played again a week later, I think Oklahoma would have smacked them. And that was a great Oklahoma team. Sam Bradford, 2,000-yard running backs, like just big-time players. But on that day, Florida was the better team. I'll say the same thing a couple years before. I felt like Ohio State in 2006 was a better football team than Florida when you just look at the rosters and all. But on that day, Florida was significantly better. But you have to be good enough to where you can make enough plays to do that, right? And I don't think they necessarily have been from a player and coaching standpoint. At times they've had the players, at times they've had the coaching. They've never had both of them at the same time to the level they need. And I think that's going to change moving forward. So I think there's no better way to end that show, Ryan, in my opinion. So Ryan, thanks for being on with us today. Great show. Check out Ryan on Twitter. He's going to have if you're a draft fan, even if it's not Notre Dame, if you're a draft fan, you got to go to Ryan Rise and Draft. Follow him on Twitter because he's always giving thoughts on the combine and stuff like that. And NFL takes. Definitely want to check that out. And of course, Notre Dame takes. And you can find him obviously at irishbreakdown.com doing his recruiting stuff. And sign up for the message boards at irishbreakdown.com. Everybody, you've definitely got to check that out. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and share this podcast. So for Ryan and Vince with us earlier, everybody have a great rest of your day. You need to hit the notification bell because there's a chance these next couple days, Ryan and I might do an impromptu NFL Combine breakdown show that you're going to want to be prepared for. So I don't know when that's going to be, but there's a chance it may happen. So make sure that's, again, why you need to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you'll be made aware that show is going to happen. So everybody have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your Friday and your weekend, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks so much for being with us on the Irish Breakdown podcast.